East and as well as around Asia. She went to Yale and has many, many, many awards, including the Samuel Johnson Prize for Nonfiction, the Overseas Press Club's Human Rights Reporting Award, as well as the Polk Award and the Robert F. Kennedy Award, and most recently Stanford University's Shorenstein Award for Asia coverage. So many, many awards. So let's just go ahead and start this amazing panel. Steve, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. For those of us who primarily cover North Korea, and we were trying to figure out just how exclusive a group it is, because we estimate there's, from the Western media, perhaps only a dozen or so reporters who are spending, they're making their primary focus on covering North Korea, whether it's from Seoul, Beijing, or I think there may be a couple who do it out of Tokyo as well. And as was mentioned, Jean is the only one who has had a regular access to Pyongyang from the American press corps due to the fact that the AP has managed to open an actual bureau in Pyongyang, which raised some eyebrows, and Jean can talk a little bit about that process as well. In my role as moderator here, I think first I'd like to kick it off by having both Jean and Barbara, in the face of the tremendous challenges of trying to cover a country where, if you look at all of the indicators for press freedom, human rights, freedom of religion, whatever, poverty, is near or at the bottom on all of these international rankings. I would say that if, for those of you who cover China and think you've just figured it out and it's become too boring, North Korea is where you need to move on to covering. And I can tell you, in my 30-something year career as a journalist and a correspondent, I don't think there's any place tougher to try to cover. In my case, I have not been permitted to go to Pyongyang, and I have not tried to sneak in, as some correspondents do, and we can also talk a little bit about the recent controversial BBC escapade and the morality of going in undercover to North Korea, and whether you are endangering anyone if you take that approach. But first of all, Jean and then Barbara, what do you see in light of all the challenges that we face in covering the DPRK? What is your overall philosophy? How do you approach it, and to try to do as best a job as shedding some light onto this country?
Well, I agree with you that it is a huge challenge, and those of us who are crazy enough to try to attempt to cover North Korea find that it's an extremely inscrutable story. I think that for us, the question of whether to open a bureau is certainly controversial. But, you know, as a journalist, what you want to do is try to get at the story from as many angles as possible. For so long, when I first got to Seoul, of course, we were doing what most journalists have to do, which is to focus on North Korean state media. Now, we at the AP did have an advantage even in 2008, because we have had a TV operation there since 2006. And so that meant that we did have access to footage that our North Korean team was taking, as well as my colleague who would go in from time to time as well. So that actually I found incredibly useful, because I would just look at that footage very closely. I would study that footage when it came through, just to get a little bit of tidbits, life on the street. Now that is something we can do by watching KCNA or by watching footage. Now, it wasn't so useful for me to get to get the dispatches necessarily from state media, because that is propaganda. But sometimes looking at changes on the street can be very helpful if you watch that over a course of years. But it is incredibly challenging. You got to find different ways to write about this place that is so closed. For us, trying to find a way to get better access on the ground was part of that equation.
Barbara, you've been at it from Seoul and then on and off from Beijing for a number of years, and you've got quite a reputation for extracting amazing stories from, maybe it's unfair to call them all defectors, but people who've come out of the country forever or those who go back and forth. What has been your particular insight into the country through that particular vehicle?
Yeah, I started off kind of in Steve's position. I was 4.5 years in Seoul, and for the first 3 years, I wasn't able to get a visa to North Korea, which made me very frustrated. And like most journalists, when you can't go someplace, you become easily very obsessed. That's one of North Korea's allures, I think, for some of us. I felt, though, even though I didn't have access to the country, I had access to many people, because in that period there were about 3,000 defectors a year coming into Seoul. And there were also a lot of people crossing the border into China, some of them defectors, some of them just working in China. So I started really interviewing everybody I could find who had come out. And the people in Seoul were helpful, the North Koreans, but a lot of them, they really were defectors. I found the people in China more interesting because often they had come out like a week or two before, and a lot of people come out of North Korea not thinking they're going to defect. They come out to see relatives on the Chinese side, or to work, or to try to trade something, and then many of them eventually become defectors, many of them don't. But I found the people on the Chinese side amazingly open and honest. I really felt like they were very truthful, and it was funny because I was usually the first Westerner they met, let alone an American, migook nom, that's the okay, obviously some people know what this means, very disparaging term for Americans. But after they got over that, they really opened up. And as I said, I'm a journalist for a long time. I think I have a sense of when people are telling the truth, because the stories would come out gradually, and people, men and women, would cry. And I think North Koreans, being very bottled up, once they start to talk, they have a lot of stories. And, but again, it was, just a piece of the story, because the people I talked to had already come out. So, as Jean said, you put together what people are saying inside Pyongyang with what people are saying outside.
Right. Jean, you've had something which I think is really unprecedented in some of your stories, which are dateline, byline stories from Pyongyang, going out on the street and getting quotes from people, the old man on the street. Do you think that these people are actually open and honest with you, though?
I think one advantage I have is because I speak Korean. My Korean's not fluent, and I've learned to speak North Korean, which is a little bit different than South Korean. So oddly enough, I probably speak better North Korean than I do South Korean, much to the chagrin of my family. But that is helpful, because once you get a camera or an interpreter involved, people do clam up. Now, that said, I would say that every North Korean is very conscious of what they're saying, and the possibility that what they're saying could get them in trouble. So every person, they grow up very aware of the danger that what they're saying could put them in. So in that sense, they're not as it's very hard as an American to go someplace where you have to watch what you say. We're just not used to doing that. But they grow up from a very early age learning to watch what they say. That said, one thing I've discovered among North Koreans is that there's a lot that doesn't get translated. If you are there as a foreigner, all the jokes, all the little anecdotes, all the little side comments that they make, those generally don't get translated. So the foreigners don't get to see that side of them. And they are very witty, and they do say little things off the cuff that help you understand, a little bit of what they're thinking. But yeah, there are times where I can't include the quotes that I get, because as soon as you get a camera there, the thing that they're most comfortable doing is parroting everything that they've heard, and if they've seen it on TV, or if they've if they've heard their leaders say it, or if they've heard other officials say it, they know it's okay. And often, and those are that is not necessarily what we want. That's not what we're trying to get. So it can be incredibly challenging to try to get to what it is they're really thinking.
Now, Barbara, you've been speaking with North Koreans who've been leaving the country over a period of some years. Have you noticed any change, any shift in their attitudes, what they're saying, and what that may portend for the future? Everyone's always trying to predict what's going to happen and when. Have you picked up any particular insight?
I think about 2 years ago, those of you who follow Korea will remember this. There was a really disastrous currency reform in, was it, I think, December 2010. And a lot of ordinary people lost their savings because they essentially confiscated all the currency. And I felt at that time that North Korea was as close to collapse as ever. When I went, I did a couple of trips to the border at that time, and people spoke in a way they never spoke before. You know, it's very, very interesting. The people I speak to at the border, they're not exactly defectors, so they still think of themselves as North Koreans, and they refer to Urinara, our country, and they're sort of apologetic. They'll say, well, I'll say, do you see homeless children? Well, to be honest, I don't want to admit it, but yes, like that. At that period, I thought things were really very, very dicey for the North Korean regime. Now people coming out, I think, are a little bit more upbeat. I haven't been to the border since the last round of threatening thermonuclear war, but when I was at the border in October, is the last time I was there, people were quite optimistic about Kim Jong-un. I've gotten very clearly the sense that people did not like Kim Jong-il. It doesn't take much scratching to find that out because things were so difficult. They still love Kim Il-sung, but they were really hopeful about Kim Jong-un. I hope he hasn't blown it. He probably has.
Well, as you mentioned, recently we're in this phase of threatened thermonuclear war. Jean, you were in Pyongyang at the time. Your reporting contrasted greatly to the reporting that was being done by some of the parachuting television correspondents from New York and London, who we all saw standing in front of the hotels in Seoul. And the tone of their reports is we were on the brink of Armageddon. You didn't detect any of that in Pyongyang, did you?
I think if you're new to the North Korea story and you read KCNA and they threaten to turn Seoul into a sea of fire, it does sound scary. But if you go back, there's a cyclical nature. If you go back and search, do an archive search, you'll see that threat has come up repeatedly. It's part of a pattern. And that, if you study Korea over years, you see that there's a pattern to this, and you can put it into perspective. I don't know exactly what the factors were for why the recent spate of rhetoric got so out of hand. Maybe there wasn't another big story going on internationally. Certainly when the Boston Marathon happened, the mood shifted. So that's something that we as journalists have to look at as an industry, is how are we driving these as well. Yes, I got to Pyongyang at the height of that, the day that they said, well, people were saying foreigners, they were asking foreign embassies to evacuate. And the mood was completely, not surprisingly, different than what you might expect. It was completely calm. People were not running to bomb shelters. And I did ask, where are the bomb shelters in case I have to evacuate? And I just laughed. So, it was a very different mood. I think it's very important if you're covering Korea to put things into perspective and give a very responsible perspective on what's going on. And maybe we as journalists need to look at whether we did that. This is part of a larger game that's going on geopolitically in the region. But yeah, it was perfectly calm. Nobody was panicking. There were it was a very different scene in Pyongyang. So hopefully by providing that color, we were able to show that, well, actually, maybe we should think about this. If they're not panicking in Pyongyang, maybe we shouldn't be panicking either.
Barbara, for those in the room or those watching who are reporters and suddenly get transferred to Seoul or Beijing or perhaps Pyongyang, or are called to come to the region to cover this story of which they really don't have any background in, what would be the fundamental piece of advice that you would give them?
I would say, look at the North Koreans as real people. I mean, one of the things I tried to do covering North Korea was look not just at the regime, but the situation for people on the ground. People tend not to cover the North Korean population because it's assumed they have no voice. Well, it's probably true. They don't have a voice. They don't have any choice in their leadership. But there are changes going on in the country, and North Koreans are, a hell of a lot like anybody else. They, care about feeding and educating their children, finding a comfortable place to live. They're now obsessed with getting mobile telephones and cameras and computers if they can. And, North Koreans are really fun to interview. They're actually, in some ways, easier to interview than South Koreans. The 4 years that I was in Seoul, my biggest complaint was that I was never invited to anybody's home. And that's a whole other story. But my North Korean, defectors, they always invited me over. And, they're I wouldn't say just like us, but they're real people.
I'm going to open it up to questions in just a minute. But first, a big question. When Kim Jong-un came into power, took over from his father, who took over from his father, we saw the same sort of media coverage that we had seen when Kim Jong-il came into power, which is, this guy's too young, he's inexperienced, this is all going to fall apart very quickly. What is your assessment now? How would you characterize Kim Jong-un and his hold on power based on what you've been able to extract?
I think anybody who claims to know anything about that is probably speaking out of turn, because we just really don't know what's actually going on behind the scenes and who is in power. I would like to point out that Kim Jong-un is not that much younger than his grandfather was when he was elevated into the leadership of North Korea. So and they are using that his youth they're trying to use his youth to his advantage, to try to contrast him with his father. Of course, his father in his later years was very ill, walked with a limp. So you've got this young guy in there. So what do you do if he is young? You try to take advantage of the fact that he is very young and energetic and can get down on the ground and pull kids into his lap the way that his grandfather did. Koreans are, whether it's especially in North Korea, they really they try to take, tradition is very important to them. And granted, what they're using now is a manufactured tradition. It is a very modern tradition, but they're trying to go create their new traditions, and they're going back to the grandfather, for example, to try to build some stability, build some longevity for a country that's very, very young. But I am never. People ask me all the time, "What is going on?" I can tell you what I'm seeing and what I. But we really don't know what's going on. It is still very much a mystery to anyone, analysts, experts. It is very opaque. But what we can see is how they're trying to, what the propaganda machinery is around trying to elevate this.
Yeah, and I would just add to that it seems to be, based on my interviews, successful, because I'm talking to people who are more disenchanted with the regime, and they're saying, the same thing. Well, we like that he's young. We think that's a fresh start. He's going to be, provide high technology and blah, 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 which shows that the propaganda is working. It's also interesting to me, this is just an observation from Beijing. I live rather close to the North Korean embassy, and they have a board of photographs, and I don't think there's a single Kim Jong-il up there now. I walked by there about 2 weeks ago. It's all Kim Jong-un, and I think they know that Kim Jong-il wasn't that popular.
Very interesting. Okay, let's open it up to questions. First, I'll go to a Seoul-based reporter, Jason.
Thank you,
Wait for the microphone, since we're on the live stream. And when you're called on, please introduce yourself as well.
Jason Struther, I'm a freelance journalist based in Seoul. May I be permitted to ask the floor 2 questions? Quick questions?
Yes.
First, Barbara, what precautions do you take to protect in light of the security situation in China, what precautions do you take to protect your sources, your fixers, translators, yourself, when you travel to the border and speak with defectors, escapees? Gene, you've been under a lot of, you've faced a lot of criticism recently, especially from one Seoul-based journalist, not myself. What do you make of all it, especially that, should the AP be mentioning in all of the articles, quoting locals in Pyongyang, that we were accompanied by government minders? What do you make of all the criticisms that has been lobbed against the AP bureau in Pyongyang?
I'll start. When I work at the border, I've worked with the same people for some years, and I won't discuss them. But I usually turn off my telephone. I usually do my interviews at night. I don't let myself be widely seen. I go where I'm going. I go from a taxi into the building and out. People don't normally give me their real names, and if they do, I don't use them.
I've had to develop a very thick skin, and I'm not actually sure who you're referring to, so maybe I'm just not seeing it, which is probably a good thing in terms of the criticism. There is a lot of criticism. I think that it's certainly valid to look at our operation with a critical eye. On the other hand, we believe it's important, I do think as a journalist it's important to try to get the story on the ground. And so it is incredibly challenging. I'm sorry, I forgot what the other part of your question was. You were asking
Just
on the
minders.
The minders, should that be mentioned when you're quoting?
We do mention that in every story. If there was a government minder, people assume for some reason that I am always attached at the hip with a government minder. I mean, it is true that for foreigners who are visiting Pyongyang, you can't walk around freely. You are required to go with a minder or a guide, as they prefer to be called. That said, I do get around myself, and I do walk around a bit. But when I do go out on assignment, if the trip has been organized by the government, or if I'm with a government minder, we make that very clear, and I think we have to make that very clear. I do make a lot of efforts to make sure that the places that we go to are places that I pick and that I organize. So, and if that's not the case, then I make it very clear in my story. So I'm not evading that whatsoever in our stories. We make that very clear. If it's not in there, it means that I was able to talk to that person with a certain amount of relative freedom. That said, this country has a lot of rules. I mean, they always tell me, you got to be aware of our rules. And then as I tweeted once, I did, look at the penal code, and I am not joking, it is this big. And I just thought,
hopefully you won't have to hire a defense attorney in Pyongyang anytime soon.
Let's not go there. But they have a lot of rules, and it's hard for them to understand that we don't operate under that many rules in the rest of the world. The inability to even leave your hotel without, and this is not necessarily applying to me, but to most, if you were to go there as a journalist, you would not be able to leave your hotel without permission or without a minder. It makes it very challenging. But for me, it's not one of the benefits of developing a relationship, developing trust with the people on the ground, is that you do get a little bit more leeway, and that's what we're working on.
But we have cases where there are reporters that go in with tour groups, and I think Simon will maybe talk a little bit about the risks of that in the following session. But what do you make of the recent cases? I know of one American reporter who went in recently. I don't know if his story has come out yet. And also there was that BBC, was it Panorama, the program, which was very controversial.
It's difficult. I mean, I think as a journalist, you have to do whatever it is you need to do to try to get to the truth of what's going on. That means covering things from different angles and different ways and covering all your bases. Sometimes that does mean going in to different countries under maybe perhaps not on journalist visas. That said, North Korea is very unusual. We have to keep in mind the risk that we put the people we are working with by being dishonest. And it's just a complicated place. It's a complicated country. And the last thing I want to do is get my staff or my colleagues into any kind of trouble because I've been dishonest about what I've been doing. So it's complicated. I do think that as journalists, we have to do what we need. We have to do what we need to do. And I've used that panorama example to people in the DPRK as an example of why you should let journalists in. You know, if you let journalists in, they will not have to sneak in. And so hopefully that's a role that we would like to play as well, to try to introduce them to Western journalists and show them that we're not all there just to show that their country is evil. We're there to try to understand their country and try to explain to the world what their country's about.
Okay. Barbara, you had something to add.
Oh, yeah, I would speak, in defense of the AP Bureau, and people are often ask me what I think because, I'm sort of, the darling of the North Korea critics. I don't know how that happened, but, I think it's great that AP has a bureau in Pyongyang, and I think, people know that there are restrictions. What's very funny about it is that Jean and I occasionally end up with very similar stories based on the inside-outside reporting. There was just an example we were speaking about before the panel started. I, in the fall, did a piece about how Pyongyang was developing and getting, phones and the dolphinarium and new apartment buildings, and the rest of the country was left behind, to envy Pyongyang. And Jean did the same piece about a month ago from Pyongyang, and the stories were actually quite similar. It was interesting because I spoke to border crossers and defectors. She spoke to, did more authorized interviews in Pyongyang, but we came to the same conclusions, and that's why I think you need voices coming from both sides to get a clear picture.
Question in front here.
Hi, I'm Sharon Chan. I'm from the Seattle Times, from the opinion section. So I want to ask about Kenneth Bay. And I loved what you said earlier about the importance of context. So is there context we're missing around Kenneth Bay's detention? And then my second question is, I feel like, and you might not want to comment on this, but I feel like the reaction or lack of action from the Korean American community in Linwood, Washington has been kind of shocking to me.
Can you just give a 20-second background on Kenneth Bay?
Kenneth Bay is he's a Korean American tour operator from Linwood, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle, and he is being detained in Pyongyang, and I believe he's actually been sentenced at this point.
Yeah, he's been sentenced.
So the two questions are the context and the weird Korean.
15 years hard labor, but then there was a subsequent announcement that they had created a sort of a special jail or prison for him, which was seen as indication that he was being treated with some sort of leniency.
Or that he's being kept apart from North Koreans.
Anybody have further
you probably know
comment,
more about,
insight?
I don't know what the Korean American community has been saying in Linwood or in. Yeah.
I think people. I don't know. I have no insight into this particular incident, but I've followed others. I think his family. I would guess that his family and friends are nervous that whatever they say might make matters worse. There are a lot of Korean Americans and Korean Canadians and South Koreans working out of Yenji and Chumin in those border areas, and they're doing a combination of relief work and missionary work. And this is not the first time somebody has been charged for having Christian literature. I mean, I don't know what he had. I assume it was more than a Bible, but it seems clear that what they didn't like was some missionary aspect to his work. And, as I said, I think whoever was working with him probably thinks that speaking up will make matters worse. I was not involved, but I was helping somebody deal with a Canadian who was imprisoned under similar circumstances. And I know for a long time the family didn't want
Right.
to report it.
Yeah, there seem to be some families who just really want to get out there, and others who are extremely cautious, and obviously they're consulting with various officials at the State Department and elsewhere about that. Okay, let me go back over here, and then I'll come down front.
Hi, my name is Alexis from CNN. I just have a question for Barbara. You mentioned earlier that the defectors that you spoke with in China came across as more open and honest than the ones that you spoke to in Seoul or in South Korea, and I'm just wondering why that was. Why do you think they're more open and honest?
I think they've, often when they meet me, it's the first time they've really spoken about their lives. And I've got to say, I'm pretty good at asking questions. And I think they can't help, they have so much pent up emotion and pain. They just blab. Whereas by the time they come to South Korea, they've been interviewed many times, and I don't think they're necessarily lying or spinning, but their stories have been told before. They're less fresh, and so they're more, like anybody, stories become more packaged over time.
Do you get the sense the South Korean authorities, when they're going through that process, are being told to watch what they say to reporters as opposed to those who are in China? Jean, have you noticed anything like that?
You mean after they go through Hanawon, or?
Yeah.
You probably know better than I do.
During the Roh Moo-hyun government, which was much more closer to the North Korean government, there was, I think, a fear of angering the North Korean government, and defectors did say they were being silenced.
Okay, we're going to go down here and then over here.
Peter Herford from Shantou and Hong Kong U. To Jean, a process question. During the hysterical time, we're going to war, we're going to war. Yours was one of the calm voices. There were calm voices elsewhere, but they were being drowned out by the hysteria. In terms of your experience with the AP, when you're swimming upstream on a story like that, what was the reaction from your own organization, and how do you handle that, and how do you handle the frustration when you're on the ground and you know what it's like, and you see all this madness going on?
It is hard to be, I do feel like I'm constantly swimming upstream, and to be, to sort of have that, to be one of the few with that point of view or that perspective. I do hope that the AP trusts my judgment and the judgment of the team that covers Korean. It's not just me, it's a group of people. We make these decisions on a daily basis. I'm not acting alone. And that we've got the breadth. What we're trying to do is build an operation that has breadth and depth and covers this story from different angles, from Beijing, from Washington, from Tokyo, from Seoul, from Pyongyang, from Geneva, from wherever. And that with all of that collective understanding, that we come to a story. It's not just me. We are looking at different factors around the world. So that I did think it was important to put that, to provide the piece that's most usually missing in most of the coverage, is that on the ground perspective and color and description in Pyongyang.
On that
So
one extreme part.
it is, I mean, of course, what were they? God, it already feels like such a long time ago. I think that, yeah, I mean, I do get a lot of questions saying that this media has reported, the media in our country, you get a lot of questions from different bureaus. But we just try to put it into perspective and put everything. We've got so many years of experience covering this issue, and try to look at it more broadly rather than just what's happening that day. Look at the larger issues at play. And also look at what's coming out in North Korean media. As you got to look at what message they're trying to send, the propaganda that they're trying to send, and put that into perspective. Not necessarily just take it at face value. Put it and compare it to what's coming out of Washington. What is Washington doing as well that might be instigating this, or so many times when, with the South Korean media, sometimes their perspective is very much fed by the South Korean government, and likewise, possibly from the U.S. So we try to bring it all together and look at all of it and try to get all those pieces together and come up with an approach.
Something related to that, how reliable do you find other news sources on North Korea, such as coming out of South Korea, Yonhap, semi-official news agency, and then you have specialty websites such as Daily NK, which some regard as sort of the National Enquirer of North Korea reporting, because it's very exciting and sensationalistic, but seems to rarely turn out to be true. It's seriously sort of based on single source reporting, some anonymous person that they've supposedly contacted on a cell phone in North Korea. Barbara, how do you gauge all of that?
I mean, you would take all of it, as just a piece of a larger package. I think that's what we're talking about. As Mike Shinoy here, if he's not, I'll steal one of his his lines. He always says reporting on North Korea is a jigsaw puzzle, and you get one piece here, one piece there, and try to put it together.
Yeah, I agree. I think all of the reporting is important to look at. Daily NK provides really great tidbits. We all come at this from a different point of view, from a different angle, with different sources, and that's what we need. So I think all of it is very necessary, but I also think that the important thing to keep in mind with North Korea coverage is you've got to be skeptical. You've got to be skeptical of everyone's sources and everybody's reporting. And it doesn't mean that you discount it, but you just got to be really critical at whether it's my reporting or Yonhap or Daily NK or LA Times.
But it's of course very difficult to confirm anything out of North Korea. Single source anonymous reporting on North Korea.
For the AP, we don't do that. Our policy is we just don't do that. You don't do single source reporting. It makes it very difficult for us. I try to keep the same standards that we use everywhere else in the AP with North Korea, and that makes it extremely difficult to get people to speak on the record, to get two sources to confirm something. But we try to stick to those standards that we use everywhere else. That definitely slips when it comes to North Korea. And we're, as journalists, we're responsible for allowing that to happen as well. But it's a challenging place. It's hard to get people to talk on the record. It's hard to get information.
Barbara, LA Times policy?
We don't do single source reporting either. But if we do an interview with one defector, which sometimes we've done, we have a disclaimer that says this story, cannot be confirmed, independently confirmed. But usually, it's a package of reporting. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was writing about the city of Chongjin was, we had all heard over years, you would see children who had starved to death, behind the railroad station. And, you hear these stories and, who knows. But when you start to interview people from the same place over time and you hear, the same accounts independently, interviewed separately, you start to put things together, which is, what I was trying to do by reporting on one city.
A few more pieces of the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Chi from HKBU. I'm wondering, do civilians in North Korea have access to internet? And are they aware of what's going on outside the territory? Thank you.
Most people do not have access to what they call the international internet. They do have, some people do have access to an internal intranet computer system that gives them, for example, if they're at a university. And most of the information that they have from the outside world, if they're getting it from official sources, obviously is cleared by a party, organization, or the government. Although I have to say from watching state TV that we're seeing a lot more information come through on state TV about South Korea, for example, and the U.S. than in the past. As I've written about before, we're seeing American cartoons, Madagascar, which I find so amazing. When I first saw it, Simon's probably seen it. You know, they're using Madagascar, which I had never seen, but it's a cartoon that takes place in New York, and all these animals are speaking like kids from the hood. So they're learning like,
yeah, and they're breaking free of their cage. I mean, it's
it's really fascinating. So they're teaching. I do wonder whether teaching them the man is really going to be useful to learning English. But so they are becoming. So it's a cartoon, but they are getting a little slice of life in the U.S. But no, I mean they don't. They can't just get online. Most people can't just get online and Google things like we can. Now, but things have changed a little bit. For example, I go in with my iPhone and I have access to the internet on my iPhone, so I can look things up.
I'll just sort of mention related that there's a company called Intermedia which has done surveys for the Broadcasting Board of Governors, which oversees VOA and RFA, and those Korean language services that broadcast in the evening to North Korea, including defector radio broadcasts, are being widely listened to, and perhaps along with smuggled in DVDs are the primary source of information. So people in North Korea are finding out about it, and I have some firsthand accounts of people actually telling others about the extent of even officials are listening to those outside radio broadcasts and not apparently making too much of a secret about it.
Paul Chung from the AP. The question is, especially for Jean, what is it like working with North Korean journalists? And is there such a thing as North Korean journalists?
Okay, maybe you should also explain about AP has a reporter and photographer in Pyongyang and how that all came about. So you need to put it in a little context too.
So we opened a bureau. We have had a TV operation there, as I mentioned, from 2006 with a cameraman and a producer. We opened a text and photo bureau last January, in January 2012. We've got a photographer. They're actually multimedia journalists. They are both trained in photography. Some of them know video and reporting. But they come from North Korea, so they are in the business of propaganda. So they're not accustomed to the way we do journalism. Working with them, they're fascinated, I would say, by our brand of journalism and how we do things. They would love to cover breaking news, but that's not how news is covered in their country. So it's very limiting in some sense for them as well. I do spend a lot of time with the local press corps, both domestic North Korean media as well as the foreign press corps, which is Chinese and Russian journalists. And it's oddly very similar in some ways to the South Korean press corps. I think one thing for us, the three of us, is that we come at this story with the Korean perspective, which is understanding North Korea through the Korean filter. And the issues that I deal with in North Korea in terms of coverage are very similar in some ways to what I'm dealing with in South Korea. The mentality of covering things the same way, and the sort of group mentality in terms of coverage. That's very different than how we cover things in the West.
You're talking about Japan there,
right?
The press clubs.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the Kijadang in Korea, South Korean Keisha Club system. Are you at all optimistic that they're going to allow you or someone else from the AP, who's not North Korean, to actually come in and report full time there? Any hope of that?
I think that would be great. There's a handful of Chinese journalists who are there with Chinese state media. There's one Russian journalist. It'd be great if we could add an American journalist to that mix, but I have no idea if and when that will happen. The country's still technically, at war with the U.S., so there are no diplomatic relations. There's no we have no representation there. It's challenging.
Would you live there, Barbara, if you were given an opportunity to report full-time out of Pyongyang?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Su Xinqi from Reuters. Barbara, in your book, Nothing to Envy, you mentioned that in the very severe stage of starvation in Chongqing, there is actually primary market economy happening, that people are trafficking or like getting goods from China and then selling and buying there. And you also mentioned that after Kim Jong-un came into throne, like people kind of get hopeful because he's younger and he looks more open. We all remember those Mickey Mouse and her wife's luxury bag reports. So is actually now market economy really like getting any further in North Korea? And since you are based in Beijing, do you think China is doing anything on that? And for Jean, I simply would like to know how people in Seoul in South Korea view North Korea as you observe. Thanks.
On the markets, my sense is that things have gotten a little bit better and the markets are open. During that currency revaluation that I mentioned, all the markets closed, and actually the purpose of that currency readjustment was to close the markets. Kim Jong-il was constantly at war with the market system, lots of rules. Jean, maybe you get to the markets in Pyongyang, you have a sense, but talking to border crossers, the markets, my sense is the markets are back open, that there are more goods coming across. And I don't know that the Chinese government is supporting the trade directly, but I mean, most of the consumer goods do come from China, and there are some military trading companies that bring things in, whether it's umbrellas or shampoo or socks, it all comes from China.
I think things are in flux right now, so we have to wait and see. The sanctions have been tightened, so we probably aren't seeing the effect of the sanction. Whether or not China's enforcing them, we will probably start seeing that later this year, so that could affect what kinds of goods are available in the markets. I do think that there are, as I reported last fall, economic, we like to call it reform, but they do not like that word. They prefer to call it new method of economic management. So there are a lot of changes going on in terms of how the economy, trying to boost incentive, give people, boost productivity. That's a really interesting change that's going on. So I would suggest keeping a close eye on that in the coming months. But I do think that if it's true that China is trying to enforce some of these sanctions, as well as both from the U.S. Treasury and from the UN and any other bilateral sanctions, that we may start seeing some changes in what's available at markets.
The crackdown on the North Korean banks operating in China seemed to be notable. They were apparently not operating within their mandate representative banks, and there were some reports that they had taken action against some activities that these banks were doing in China. I don't know if either of you have reported on that recently.
I think it's not. I think it's trading companies that have accounts in Chinese banks, and my understanding is that the North Korean trading companies work very closely with Chinese trading companies, and if those Chinese trading companies cut off the North Koreans, it could really affect the goods available and the financial system.
I think the second part of that question was about the attitude or view that South Koreans have about North Korea. Okay.
You could probably answer that question better than I can.
We actually have a number of South Koreans here who probably best to talk about that, because I think different people have different opinions, and I certainly don't want to summarize South Korean attitudes towards North Koreans. I think it's kind of complicated.
It is very complicated.
Yeah. Okay. In fact, here's an expert on that.
Sean Lim from Arirang News in Seoul. I had a question. Speaking of the economy, where do you guys usually go to for macroeconomic indicators or data? A lot of the times, in the West, like even if there's like an uptick or downtick in like one indicator in like unemployment or housing, it sends can send governments into a tizzy, and people can get an indication of what the anecdotes are in truth. But in North Korea, I mean, where do you get these figures, and are they reliable?
That's like a black hole because they haven't publicly published figures in a long time.
And even if they did, would we consider them accurate?
I am trying to get some of those details or facts and figures from the North Koreans, so we at least have what they say. But obviously, we do rely on the governments, China, South Korea, that watch these things very closely. For example, trade. The most useful figures probably come from China. South Korea, obviously, the Bank of Korea follows. But you have to take all these figures with a grain of salt because nobody has real access to figures from the North Korean side.
There are some think tanks. Peterson Institute tries to extract and drill down and make some conclusions on data. So I think overall trends, maybe perhaps a bit delayed compared to other countries, we can sort of get some data out of it. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Peterson Institute is very good. There's a couple of economists, Marcus Noland,
Right.
Among them. But again, it's all piecemeal. Bank of Korea. I mean, we usually use Bank of Korea. That would be South Korea.
Professor?
In Chen, Hong Kong, you. The Chinese seems to be taking a tough line towards the North Korean about. It's also called for a resumption of talks. It warned the North Korea about its nuclear ambitions and all that. So, what's your reading of the Chinese government attitude and policy? Is it changing? Do you see, is it significant? What should we read about this?
I guess that would be me since I'm based in Beijing. I think the Chinese government is kind of floundering about, or, sort of like the Americans trying to figure out what to do. I think their policy is not very clear. North Korea is handled, directly through the party relations, through the Communist Party and the Workers' Party. It kind of bypasses the foreign ministry. I will say, talking to like senior Chinese academics, I mean, the stuff they're saying about North Korea, I have never heard before. They're really angry, but I'm not sure that it's translated into real policy. We've all been waiting. The first quarter trade numbers between China and North Korea were down, and we're waiting to see, because I've heard that April is back up. But boy, I talked to somebody at a really senior Chinese academic after the North Korean delegate handed the letter from Kim Jong-un to Xi Jinping, and he said, "Oh, Xi Jinping shouldn't have met with that guy. It's too soon. They're giving the North Koreans face. It's a bunch of lies." And boy, it's you don't usually hear that from Chinese academics.
Right. Not going to touch that one right now. I think my observation is something's obviously afoot, and that anger has been pretty well expressed, both, I think, not only from academics, but if you read between the lines in the stories coming out in Xinhua, there was even commentary about some of the photographs that came out in the past few days from that encounter in Beijing, which was not in keeping with sort of the types of images from past meetings. And there was also a notable absence, I think, on recent anniversaries about the floral baskets being received in Pyongyang from Beijing. So that's another indicator to watch, is the floral basket.
Although I do think
notices.
some of this, watching from afar, gets out of hand. I mean, people saying, "Oh, the Chinese ambassador hasn't been seen in months." I see him he's always there. I see him in Pyongyang all the time.
You mean the North Korean ambassador?
No, for example, people say, "Oh, the Chinese ambassador hasn't been in Pyongyang. What's
in
going on?
Pyongyang,
What does that
okay.
mean?" But I do see him there. He's always there. So anyway, I do think that things are evolving in the region. We've got new leaders in all the big players here. So things are just evolving, and we need to wait and see how these policies fall into place.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes left. I don't want to penalize the people sitting in the back, although they should have got here early and got a seat in front.
Hi, my name is Diana. I'm from the Wall Street Journal. Jean, can you talk about your day-to-day operation in Pyongyang and what is it like to run the bureau there?
My day-to-day operations. I usually try to visit our bureau, go to our bureau in the KCNA building in the mornings. But I usually pack our schedule pretty tightly. I make a lot of requests, try to make sure that we have some interviews in the morning, and try to use my lunches and my dinners to meet with contacts and to conduct interviews. It's a pretty busy schedule. I am up very early in the morning and working until probably 2 a.m. I get no sleep. And I try to watch as much. It's as Barbara knows from having been there, it's an intense place, as Simon knows from spending a lot of time there. It's an intense place, and you're always on alert. You're always trying to pay attention, so it's exhausting. But it is a combination of going out in the field. I try to make at least 1 or 2 visits out of the city and get out to the country, get to different places that I haven't been to. So usually, yeah, it's intense. It's intense.
When's your book coming out?
Do I have time? You barely have time to write my
It definitely sounds like you've got enough material for a book. I'm sure you've thought about it, or people have approached you.
Well, people talk about that, but I honestly have not. It's been very difficult working on building this bureau, and we are still building this bureau. It's only been a year and a half, and I am still focused on making sure to get this. We're getting this operation off the ground, and that we're continuing to pursue our goals and reach our goals in terms of access. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to build trust and try to get access. Not only building the relationships, but also understanding what it is we need to see and who it is we need to ask. And actually, people who've been there for a long time, like Koryo Tours, they are a good example of the benefit of building that relationship and getting better access.
Okay. I think we've got time. A quick follow? Microphone?
Quick follow-up. So what do you do in your free time, or is there any
free
way
time?
Yeah.
She just said she's working till 2 a.m. 2 to 6 a.m.
Yeah,
how do you decompress?
Yeah,
there?
almost nothing is free time for me there, but I do have a couple things. I am from Minnesota, so I love to ice skate, so that's my 1 hour, and it is very, so that is my 1 hour to escape everybody, because no one can keep up with me on the ice rink. But that's one thing. Another thing is obviously the Koreans, whether they're South Korean or North Korean, they love to sing. So we do a lot of karaoke.
What kind of songs are in the rotation, in the karaoke rotation?
Oh my gosh. Well, my staff loves the Carpenters, so I've learned a lot of Carpenters because that's before my time. But a lot of Carpenters, a lot of ABBA. I tend to sing a lot of Beatles. I have sung, I think my trademark song is Christina Aguilera's "Beautiful," which they, so there are Korean songs. I grew up singing traditional Korean songs, and those are the songs that we have in common. Obviously, Arirang, 반갑습니다, nice to meet you, but also the songs that I grew up with as a child, the pre-division songs. I don't know the new propaganda songs, but the Chinese journalists do. But there's. I think you'd be surprised if you go to a karaoke place in Pyongyang at how many foreign songs there are. There are a lot of American and British classics. And that's always fascinating to see.
Yeah, you would think some of those lyrics could be considered subversive.
Yes.
Maybe not ABBA songs or the Carpenters, but Beatles. But I guess there's no interpretation of the lyrics, I assume.
I mean, it's pretty fascinating. I do sometimes take pictures and post them on I don't know if I've posted them on my Instagram, but maybe I should do if there's an interest, if you're all interested in what kinds of songs are on the song list, because some of them, I'm not sure where some of these song lists are coming from South Korea, and so there's sometimes gospels in there.
That's interesting.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that the songs are in the machine. Often the machines don't have the South Korean songs or some of these American songs. They're blocked.
Okay.
But,
I'm getting the signal to wrap up. If someone has a short question, and we can maybe get in a short answer, anybody who's just feels that they've got to get something in or something we've really not touched upon that you feel is important. Okay, in front of the camera.
Try to do a short question, but the answer might be long. I'm Christiane from GMSC and just wanted to know what is the hunger situation right now? I mean, there was a time when the World Food Program, UN World Food Program, was feeding 6 million people, and we were talking about famine in North Korea. So what's the situation now? Has it improved?
I don't think that the UN agencies are getting enough money. They have not been able to fulfill their requests, and I don't think they have had slightly better harvests, but this is a country that doesn't have a lot of arable land. They don't have a lot of land to farm. The land that they do have has been destroyed. It's just not great land. They just don't have. They're not growing a lot of their own food, and they're trying to improve that with fertilizer and improving their the way that they're doing their farming. But who knows what's going to happen now with the sanctions? So I think, but in terms of the hunger, no. I mean, millions of people most of the population relies on rations from the state, and that amount is going down. They're not getting much in their monthly rations, and those with money, if they've got another source of income, can supplement that with meat and vegetables and protein, but most people can't. It's a dire situation. I mean, there are a lot of people who are not getting the nutrients that they need. You know, I think famine is a very technical term that people in that industry use only to apply it to certain cases, and it's not considered a famine. It's not considered a famine right now. It's considered chronic. You know, there's a chronic food shortage.
But do we really have any idea what's going on in the more remote provinces?
I mean, I think I do because I speak to people at the border, and the World Food Program has much better access to the remote provinces than they used to. I think this year was, as Jean said, a somewhat better year. There was a better harvest. The last WFP report said it was a better harvest this year, but it wasn't as good as I think 2009. The markets are back open, so that helps a bit. So it's it's a little bit better, not great.
There was a recent aid request from Pyongyang to Mongolia, which I thought was kind of interesting, which I thought we should be looking into a little bit more. Anyway, unfortunately, I'm sure we could go on for a couple more hours about this very fascinating topic, but we're out of time. But there is more to come about North Korea, I will tell you that. But thank you very much to my colleagues, Jean from AP, for coming in from, where did you fly in from? Not from Pyongyang this time, from Seoul.
I came from Seoul. Barbara
from Beijing. And thank you very much for your great questions, and really appreciate the turnout today.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Steve. So we're going to have a quick coffee break, but before you guys leave, I'm just going to tell you that our next breakout sessions are going to be right here, T2, at 10:45, Social Media and Asia Elections. T3, just across the way, will be Truth in Media.
Oh, great.
And if you want to continue the discussion about North Korea, then T1 downstairs will be Choreo Tours with Simon Cockrell. Coffee break until 10:45, and then go ahead to the next breakout sessions. Thank you.
ran away, so we don't have.
We don't know what water is this.
Again, we can put.
All right, if I could have the folks in the back just move down a little bit closer, since it's a little bit more of an intimate discussion that we're going to be having.
Okay.
All you guys in the back behind the camera, come on down. Come on down. Please.
Right. Two ladies.
Come on down. Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at you right there. That's right. Come on down. Great. Thanks so much for coming on down. Yeah, I'll pass this. That's fine. Okay, you guys. All right, so good morning again. I wanted to introduce our next panel here, Friend or Foe, How Social Media Affected Elections in Asia. So we have a great panel actually going across the region. So first off, we have Ayako Mie over at the Japan Times. And we also have Jeremiah Fu over at Shantou University. And we have Yo Kyung Lee at the Associated Press. And of course, Kevin Seitz, lecturer right here at HKU. So I'm just going to turn it on over and let you take it away.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. How's the conference so far for you? You learning anything? Good. If this were an Irish-American journalist conference, we'd be meeting in a pub this morning. But instead, we're here, and we'll actually probably learn something by the time it's over. You're here to hear, obviously, the panel that was advertised. And how we're going to do this is, fairly breezy. We're going to give the panelists a chance to talk for about 3 to 5 minutes about their area of coverage. And we obviously have the powerhouse nations in Asia represented here, Korea, Japan, and China. And so we're going to talk about the impact of social media, SMS, on the elections in those regions, as well as Malaysia, an area that Jerry has been focusing on. But I'd like to broaden it out as well, if that's good with you. We're going to let them talk for a little bit, ask some questions amongst the panelists. And then about 20 minutes or 30 minutes into the panel, we're going to open this up to you and let you ask some of the questions that you're interested in learning about. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We don't want this to be like one of my classes here at HKU where I talk and everyone looks at me like I'm from Mars. That happens quite a bit. So a little bit of interaction would help. And any questions that you have, we'll definitely get to them. Just hold off as we get through this initial panel discussion. Yukhyung?
Yes, so is this on? Okay. I'll just talk to you a little bit, introduce you to how it was happening in South Korea. So at the end of 2011, Constitutional Court made this ruling that allowed people to use Twitter and social media to express their opinion on certain candidates or elections. So it was actually 2012 when social media became real campaign tools that public and the candidates could use. And there were two really important elections in South Korea, one general elections and presidential election in 2012. And that's when we really first saw the impact of SNS on elections. But it's been only 1 year, so I don't think we have enough studies or data to draw a conclusion about what's been the real impact of SNS on elections. However, a lot of people argue that it did help bringing up voters' turnout, and the voters' turnout was really high in 2012 presidential election, which was 76%. So a lot of people say the SNS did help bringing up the voters' turnout, but in South Korea, although a lot of people are smartphone users and many people are very active on online forums or SNS, a lot of these area also is dominated by more people who support the liberal opposition party candidates. So when they thought the election is going to be the opposition candidate was going to win the presidential election, but when the election result came out, it was actually the conservative ruling party candidate who won the election. So these people who were really active on the social networking services and thought the opposition candidate was going to win felt very disappointed when they saw the actual election result, which the Conservative Party member won by a margin that was wider than expected, even though the voters' turnout was really high, which people thought was going to be favorable for the opposition party candidate. So South Korea has about 1 year of history in SNS and elections, and there were some impact, but I think I would say it might be too early to draw from a conclusion whether there's a causation between SNS and elections. So that will be, I think, just to introduce what's going on in South Korea. Yeah.
Malaysia is a bit different. We have no such thing as press freedom. Our newspaper can be closed down in like 24 hours when if the government doesn't like you, they don't have to like your face, and then they can close you down the next day, basically. So since '99, I'll be talking about 3 general elections actually: '99, 2004, and 2004, 2008, and the recent one, 3 weeks ago in Malaysia. So we started using, no, what am I saying? Why am I using the word we? I mean, the Malaysians are using SMS as the tool to mobilize people to go to places to listen to political rallies and all that. That was back in 2004, and then we were asked to help develop technologies to do mass SMS. That was some time ago. Then in 2008, there was a huge turnout of voters, and the incumbent ruling party won again, but they lost 2 states. Okay, there are 13 states in Malaysia. Most of the states are governed by the ruling party, but they lost 5 states and they lost 2 more states to the opposition. And they claim that the loss was due to social media. People were blogging about it. People were mobilized because the war was lost on the blog platform. So between 2004 and 2008, both sides, the opposition and the incumbents, spent a lot of resources in building up more blogs, more free newspaper online, and things like that. And then came Facebook. So when Facebook came, people were building Facebook-like pages and all that to heighten issues that the government doesn't like. Things like the submarine issue, if you know about it. The Malaysian government bought a submarine that doesn't submerge. And then, yes, plenty of money. And then, of course, the murder of this Mongolian woman who later became subject matter of one TVB series. And then, and of course, the diamond ring that our Prime Minister's wife bought and all that. So things like that, they are all exposed. And then, of course, government aides who were thrown out of the ICAC equivalent of Malaysia office and died. So things like that. So stories like that were being exposed because in the past there's no such thing as an avenue for stories like that to be exposed. So come 2013, very high turnout of voters, same as Korea. We had 80-something% turnout. So all of us were thinking, oh, maybe this time the wind of change has blown. 51% voted for the opposition, 47% voted for the ruling party, but the ruling party won. Very strange. Okay, anyway, we have a very strange system where in certain parts of Malaysia, you can win by 56,000 majority, and you only win 1 seat. In other areas, you win by 200 majorities, and you can win 3 seats. Things like that. It's very strange. Anyway, so that's Malaysia, and social media has been used to do a lot of this work. And before the 2013 general election, Google actually contacted us because we were involved in a YouTube channel called Media Rakyat, where we go out and do political rally talks of political opposition political leaders, and so they put us on the front page of the Google general election page, and we were getting something like 500,000 hits per day during the campaign period. So we made quite a fair bit of money from Google Ads. So that's about it. And on the China side, because I teach at Shantou U, so we have some students, and we believe if we don't bring the students out to Malaysia, they'll probably never ever get to see a chance to see a general election in their entire life. So we just decided to bring some of them to Malaysia. So 2 of them are here actually. Can you raise your hand? Yeah. So 2 of them are here. They went to Malaysia. They were involved in observing how the election works and all that. So that's basically our involvement and my observations in the last few years. Yeah.
Yako?
So on Japan, I have a question. So what do you think the average age of the people who actually cast ballots in Japan?
52.
Oh my gosh, you guys are really good. 53. That's really, well, it's really reflective of the growing population in Japan, right? So finally, the Japanese government decided that they're gonna let the lawmakers or the candidates to use internet once election kicks off. So before, like, I mean, we have upcoming election in July, upper house election, but before that, the lawmakers could not update their Facebook posting or comments or tweet or anything like that to solicit votes. So, in order to attract more young voters, they decided to finally deregulate the election campaign. But I'm not really sure if that will really push up some of the voter turnout in Japan, as you saw in South Korea. Because in Japanese election system, it's pretty much it's more about face-to-face, saying hello, handshaking, that gets you a lot of votes, especially like when you look at the data in 2013, the last election, December, 84% of the votes were coming from 60s. I'm sorry, the people in the 60s, 84% voted. And in the people in the 20s, 49% voted. So we're not really sure if the internet can really help to sort of get the young people like involved in politics or interested in politics, because there is like a fundamental problems in playing in Japanese politics. I don't really have to go over this now because I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of questions on this. But so we are yet to see. At the same time, we have a very strict rule. So if even though the internet is going to be deregulated in the upper house election in July, only the political party and the candidates can send out emails to the voters soliciting some supports, but not the third party, meaning I cannot send Eric, hey, you know what, can you vote for ABC candidate? If I do that, I have to pay probably $5,000 in fine and probably face the possibility of like being stripped of the right to vote for or run for public office for a year. So people are kind of wondering like, what if I violate the law and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure if this, unless the government do a great job in explaining what the rules are, I think we are not going to see a lot of like effect from the deregulation of the internet. But it's still fascinating because, as you know, I mean, it's the internet penetration in Japan is more than 80%, and the young people are using more Facebook, Twitter, and stuff like that. So I'm sure they'll help, but I don't know the extent, as you just said. We kind of have to gauge the effect after the election.
Actually, just to relate it to that, there are other many factors that drive up voters' turnout. So we can single out SNS as the biggest impact driving up the voters' turnout. For example, there was high anticipation that South Korea's presidential election is going to be a really tight race. So that also prompted a lot of older generation to go to the polls. So when you look at the election results, people in the 50s and 60s were like the largest voters group among the different ages. So that also helped the conservative party win the election. Yeah.
Yako brings up a very interesting point. When you look at Japan and 80% internet penetration there, one of the most wired nations on earth, the fact that this isn't able to be utilized in the elections in a very effective way is incredibly surprising. Is there a reform movement to liberalize the access during the elections and to make it a more important factor? Or is the fact that your average voting age is 53, as you said, going to keep the internet on the outskirts or the perimeter of the elections?
Oh, no, that's exactly what I was talking about. So we passed the legislation to allow the candidates and political parties to use the internet, but still we have some regulations. So we're probably gonna let the average voters to utilize emails and something like, or banner like advertisement to solicit more support. At the same time, there's and also like in campaign money is big, right? I heard that President Obama actually collected $69 million during the election through like the internet, and there's like a survey by a life insurance company in Japan that 8% of the 1,000 respondents that said that they're gonna donate money via internet if the internet is gonna be deregulated in the election.
So what are the regulations at this point? That there's a looser ability to use it now that that particular law has passed. But can you raise funds? Can you actually use it to campaign actively?
Yeah, I think so. But well, again, like it's a really, really murky area. So the things that I clearly know is that I cannot send out emails soliciting support. Please vote for Kevin. No, I cannot do that. And then only the political parties actually have a banner advertisement on the internet, not the political candidates. So there's like a lot of like very what do you call it, fuzzy like areas that the government has to really good job like explaining and also probably further deregulate in the later elections.
It sounds like it's an evolving process there, the same way that it was in the United States in the 2008 election. The Obama campaign was actually congratulated for doing a very strong social media campaign, but that effort was somewhat general. In this 2012 election, where they were facing a very bad economy and a lot of other problems around the world, the Obama campaign started focusing on data mining, a very specific focus of targeting individual voters by their interest. Is that something that we will begin to see in the developing use of the internet in the regions that you're covering?
Well, if I first start with South Korea, in 2002, it was the first time that each candidate's campaign team had a team manager who was in charge of doing the SNS campaign. But we have not seen such sophisticated level of data mining or trying to tailor the campaign to individual voters depending on their interests. Mostly they were trying to publicize when the candidates were giving a speech in the street, or just to stream broadcast when they were giving a speech. So it was still in the basic elementary level. But I think because South Koreans, there's more than 33 million smartphone users out of 50 million population. So given that, I think we can probably see such efforts coming in a couple of years, yeah.
And that's a two-way conversation. Obviously, using the internet to organize and to solicit support, but also reading about the elections and reading about the issues that are affecting them. You cover in your work the technology giant Samsung and their very successful smartphone, the Galaxy. Has that had an impact on young voters, getting them more involved by being aware of the issues that are out there? Is there any data on that?
Oh, are you asking about Galaxy's impact on election? Yeah. Galaxy smartphone? Well, well, yeah, it is true. Galaxy is one of the most popular smartphone in South Korea and in the globe. Actually, Apple has much fewer market share in South Korea. I wouldn't specifically single out a single smartphone as in having a greater impact than the other smartphone, because I think there are studies that argue, say, Apple smartphone user or certain smartphone users are more active on SNS than the other smartphone users if you look at it that way. So, but South Korea first saw their smartphone at the end of 2009. So compared to 2009 and 2013, smartphone is playing a lot of role in shaping public opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and adding to that, 2 weeks before the actual campaign period started in Malaysia, most of my friends who are helping out in the campaigning, they all advertise on their Facebook, can I buy a second-hand iPhone?
And was that specifically so they could follow the
Yes,
elections?
so no, not only that, because the iPhone, you can take pictures, then you can put it on Facebook and all that. It's very convenient, right? So all of a sudden, everybody is looking for iPhone 3S. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, can I have one and all that? So people are asking for second-hand iPhones, very specifically, in Malaysia. So that I see that as a sign that that this is going to be a tool for communications, basically.
Let's explore that a little bit, Jerry, because you said in Malaysia, these YouTube sites that you're involved with had as many as 500,000 views per day.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't just going to internet cafes and looking at their desktops on those. They're seeing these campaign videos on their smartphones.
On their smartphone, up to 40% mobile devices.
And is that kind of traffic coming directly from Malaysia, or is this the Malaysian diaspora that's involved or interested in the elections, and how does that impact them?
A little bit of both, because the Malaysian, we have about 1-point-something million Malaysians all over the world. So we have been trying to get these people to come back to Malaysia to vote, because this year Malaysia has finally decided that we should do postal vote, but nobody trusted postal vote. So we all started a campaign to bring people back to Malaysia to vote. There's a huge campaign going on. There was a huge campaign going on in Hong Kong to encourage people to vote, to go home and vote. So singers get together, writers get together, songwriters get together, things like that. So there's a huge community that will form on the social network to bring people back to vote. So, but the thing is, the only way to bring the news out, we don't have radio, we don't have TV. The best way is through YouTube, actually. So YouTube was being used by most of these groups. I wouldn't call them, they are not even NGOs. There's a new term in Malaysia, non-government individuals, NGIs. So these are NGIs who are working on their own with their own resources, using social network as the medium to bring the news out. So many of our viewers are local, but more so in the region, Singapore, Hong Kong, a little bit of China, because China you need VPN, and some parts of the United States. That's about it. Yeah.
When we talk about the digital divide, we're usually talking about people that have access to the internet and people that don't. I think in the cases of elections, the digital divide that we're looking at is really more along the lines of age. Younger voters or younger people maximizing both the internet for information and possible mobilization politically. Let's talk about that digital divide, the age digital divide in your regions of coverage. Yako, you want to address that first? You brought that up a little bit with
digital
just the age.
divide?
In Japan?
You know what? The digital divide actually exists mostly in the lawmakers. I hear a lot of lawmakers saying that I'm not going to intentionally not going to capitalize on the internet to seek votes, because their constituents, as I just explained, would not see what I say or what I want to campaign for on the internet. Mostly it's much better to just communicate directly. And actually, when I go to the website of the lawmakers, there are people like they have not updated their comments since 2 years ago or something like that. That's unforgivable, for private companies and stuff like that. So I would say probably the people who are lagging behind the technological revolution would be the lawmakers.
I want to comment on that specifically. The head of Japan's Restoration Party, Toru Hashimoto, recently made some comments about comfort women, the use of sexual slavery during World War II. And I wonder if that digital divide hurt him, if he didn't think those comments were going to be amplified. If I could just quote what he had said, and you may be familiar with this issue, whether it was of their own volition or against their will, the comfort women system was something necessary, he said. For military morale back then, it was probably necessary. So he's talking about the Japanese military's use of women for prostitution during World War II. And the question for Yako is, comments like that, do they really reflect a complete disconnect with the internet, that they don't understand how these comments are going to be amplified?
Well, we have to remember that how Hashimoto became so popular or powerful. I mean, he completely utilized the clout of the internet. He disseminated, I don't remember how many, but I'm sure he had like, over 10,000, I'm sure, like, millions of like followers and stuff like that. That's how he got himself popular in the first place. But he made a big mistake, that he thought he could be Shintaro Ishihara, another hawkish lawmakers who announced the purchase of Senkaku Island or Diaoyu Island. That he's been in the politics for like decades, 50 years, 60 years, and there's like the sentiment that the Japanese voters, including the legislators, says, oh, that's the Ishihara, so we can just let him say whatever he wants. But that's not the case with Hashimoto. He's still political novice. And he didn't really I don't think he did not understand the power of the internet, but I think he did not understand the international diplomacy or the politics, and how is the comment of the lawmaker would affect the Japanese diplomacy or national interest. I was reading a story by Hiroko Tabuchi, New York Times reporter. How she quoted him, how she referred him, a future candidate of the Japanese prime minister. Again, this is not the case. He's not going to be the prime minister. We knew that after the election, December election. But something like the New York Times, with much clout, influence, place him like that. That will go viral. So that's the power of the internet that he failed to understand.
But I think the Japanese are just realizing the power of social media. In the past, internet is just a tool, because my wife is Japanese, so she doesn't use Facebook, she doesn't Twitter, she doesn't do any of those things. She sends me emails, and then she pretends it's SMS. So it's that bad, okay? So basically, right? And my wife isn't 53 years old. So the thing is, and a lot of people see that as an opportunity, so they go into Japan and try to promote social media. So I know a few Chinese who are working in Japan to help promote social media. So now in China, Weibo, one of the top Weibo character, we don't use character because she's more like an actor, is a Japanese AV star, right? And she is not being promoted by Japanese, she was promoted by Chinese. So, but the thing is, it's changing, right? I wouldn't say the old. They are just realizing that, look, there's this new tool, and then we should be moving on to that. So I think that's going to change maybe in the next 5 years.
I agree with you, but I think the thing is, like, I think politicians tend to fail to understand how much what they say on the internet can harm them.
Yeah.
And then Hashimoto actually had that. And now I'm not really sure if the party will exist after the election. There's like a party convention a couple of days ago. Only 40 people came. This is big. I mean, I'm not really sure. Isshin no Kai is like, definitely getting a hard hit from what Hashimoto said and what Hashimoto did in the internet sphere, as well as in the internet sphere.
Obviously, ramifications from what he said. While we've moved into policy a little bit, let me keep Jerry on the line here. The conflict over the East China Sea Islands has been very interesting in China and Japan. How is that playing out on the internet in China? And how has that kind of fueled the discussion or the debate?
You mean China-Philippine side or China-Japan side?
China-Japan side.
Okay, there are two types of Chinese. The really hot-blooded ones and the calm ones. So unfortunately, it's the hot-blooded one that are very outspoken on the internet. So as long as you post anything about Japan, anything at all, you just say sushi tastes good, and that's it. Then the next 2,500 comments will be negative. You are you're a sellout, you're a dog, you're a whatever, right? All kinds. So, but the thing is that is anyone who understands the relationship between Japan and China will see that as them using that as a means to vent out their whatever anger that they have. I know a lot of Chinese who work in Japan because we recently went to Japan to cover the earthquake, second anniversary earthquake memorial. So and we interview a lot of Chinese. Then they say, you know, most Chinese don't really know where their anger come from, and then those anger were manifested on the internet. But the thing is, don't read those messages as negative. I see that as a country opening up.
Again, is this a generational thing?
It is, yes. Yes.
I guess I should have asked you how it played out in your household.
My wife thinks that the island belongs to Japan. Okay. I'll just keep it at that.
Right.
I'm Malaysian, so really.
One more question on the broader issues for you, Kung. When we look at what's been happening on the Korean Peninsula with Kim Jong-un and the recent threats of using nuclear force in the Pacific, how has that played out in the internet, in what you're seeing in public dialogues and kind of chat rooms in South Korea?
Well, one thing we have to keep in mind is that even before Twitter and Facebook took off in South Korea, South Koreans always had gatherings online using internet cafes or online communities, and people actually who gather online, they discuss things and they meet outside the internet in the real space to hang out as well. So there are places where a lot of very politically active young people gather, and a lot of people just gather for like getting tips about cooking and things like that. And so in both spaces, like Twitter, Facebook, and on this online cafes, people who are really active and very emotional about issues about Japan or North Korea, they continue to express their anger or their protest against those provocations. But I think if you look at the real space, real life, people's reactions might be quite different from what you see online, because as you said, what you hear online is more people who are very opinionated, not opinionated, but people who are more vocal than here. And if I go to the street to interview people during the North Korea's like provocations, provocative rhetorics, people will be often calm, and many of them may not know about what North Korea is saying. And some of them who heard about them told me that they just got a call from their friends overseas asking if you guys are doing okay. And in Korea, and if you look at the Seoul street, it would be just like any other day.
I guess it proves true for the internet as well as for general society. The people who are most involved in politics and in issues are usually the minority, a small number. So. Okay, we've had a pretty interesting panel discussion so far. Let's expand this a little bit and open it up to our audience. Again, we're talking about the use of the internet and SMS in politics, but we can expand that a little bit if you'd like. But let's keep it focused on the internet areas. You had your hands up first, so you're the quickest.
Thank you. I'm Hannah Bay, the AAJA Asia Seoul Vice President. So one question that I actually saw on Twitter from one of our members in Seoul was about hashtag use. I feel like in South Korea, hashtags have not come in the same way in terms of the popularity of their use. Do you think that there are other techniques that South Koreans and people in Malaysia and Japan can use to mobilize on social media and to find like-minded people?
Well, I think one reason South Koreans did not use hashtag on Twitter in the beginning was because Twitter did not offer Korean language hashtag, but I think they changed that, and now, so that was like a technical issue in the beginning. I'm not sure if there would be any other or better way to search other than the hashtag, but can you?
Do you think that people are using hashtags more now?
I think more than before. I see Korean hashtag on Twitter. Yeah.
Hi, Malte. I'm freelancer based in Seoul as well. And I have a question. Would you say that in Korea you have freedom of expression on the internet, or especially when it comes to North Korea, it can get very dangerous for people to express their opinion freely, even on the internet.
Well, thanks for bringing up that question. Constitutionally, yes, we have freedom of expression, but we also have laws that National Security Act, which bans praising or distributing anything that praises North Korea. So some of the users on Twitter has been prosecuted for retweeting North Korean tweets. So even though we have freedom of expression, reading those cases on newspaper probably make people to self-censor more, and you cannot explicitly praise North Korea on online space or in real world. And another issue is that South Korea has a pretty, you can be criminalized by, you can face the criminal suit for libeling or distributing false information. It's not just like civil suit, you pay compensation, but you can get also jailed. We have a very, it's really easy to sue someone based on libeling in South Korea. So that also, I think, made people self-censor in a way, yeah.
Other questions? While we're on that issue, why don't we ask Jerry? Jerry, are you seeing any changes in China in a more openness on the internet? Are we going to continue to have to use VPNs and other workarounds to get what we want?
We were hoping the new leader would open up Facebook, but it was we were still hoping. See, most of our friends live on Facebook, so we had our problems. So anyway, we see the people opening up more. Actually, the users of social network has opened up more than before. Nowadays, you see things that, even you compare now and a year ago, the kind of things that they share online. In the past, they share about their life, boyfriend, girlfriend, dogs, pets, whatever. Now they share their thoughts, which is very different. And with more use of multimedia elements, things like animated GIFs, things like video, even recordings of audio. So things like that. They share songs, they share things like that. So I see that as a sign of people opening up, using different means to express themselves. Sometimes they're angry, but they don't want to say they're angry. They put an angry song up. So things like that. Or as you can see in certain places, they change the picture of the avatar, right? They change the color to black or something. So that's a form of protest, but it's a very silent but vocal protest that people use.
I wonder, are there any other interesting workarounds? I know that David Bandersky with our China Media Project here has talked about how newspapers can actually use codes and puzzling headlines to express dissatisfaction or some type of other protest. Are we seeing that on the internet at all?
It has been going on for many years, but the thing is, there's a Chinese saying that goes, the good is 1 foot tall, but the evil is 1 meter tall, things like that. So it's a constant cat and mouse game that you devise something new, and then they come and close you down. Then you think of something new again. Then they come and close you down. I still want to go back to China tomorrow. So
well, maybe we can shift the blame to the giant internet portals. I worked at Yahoo at one time in 2006. And at the time, we found out, kind of surprisingly, that Yahoo was actually cooperating with Chinese authorities to give information about bloggers
yes, that's
there.
because they have no choice. They needed to have their server in China.
Sure, but is there any anger towards those portals for cooperating rather than maybe taking a political stand and saying, no, we're not going to be a part of this?
I think there was a huge protest online to boycott Yahoo for a moment. But people forget. Then after that, they forget.
Short memories on the internet.
Yeah, especially. I was just sharing with Mia just now. Jimin LDP supporter, the ruling party's website, like page on Facebook has 43,000 likes. Malaysian typical 37,000 likes. I think I did a screenshot. A typical Malaysian political fan page has 435,000 likes. So that's the kind of difference you see between Japan and Malaysia. We don't have high-speed bandwidth to the home, but we have plenty of people using them. Yeah.
Questions? No, we have to
Actually, I have a
Go ahead.
question to. I would like to know about other Asian countries as well. Maybe because many South Koreans are early adopters, but I think we started to see signs that a lot of people are already feeling fatigue about so many social media around. And so even though even the two major candidates during the presidential elections, they did not have more than like 1 million followers on their Twitter. So out of 50 million populations. So you don't see that Twitter gaining as much traction among people, and also we start to see reports that South Koreans are opting out of public social media like Twitter and more going to private ones like mobile messengers like KakaoTalk or things like that. So I wonder if this is common in other Asian countries, if you see this kind of sign in other Asian countries as well.
I think Japanese people are very, very big on Twitter. I think the language itself is very compatible with the 24 character. And then I hear I read stories that people are actually using the Twitter to look for some dinner buddies or lunch buddies, especially those who are really, really lonely. They just Twitter, say something, what, I'm not doing tonight, and then he suddenly gets some response from his friends, let's go out for dinner or something like that. So I think there's a little bit usage of the Japanese Twitter users. But at the same time, one of my staff writer wrote a story about the two people actually campaigning against the Twitter. So they sit on the street, and then if you have something that you want to tweet, just tell me. Let's not the boycott, but let's face the reality rather than the virtual world.
I mean,
Is
what
that
about the
very-
audience?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Is
yeah.
that very popular in Japan? Is there kind of a reaction against the internet?
No, I don't think so. And the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is probably the biggest, fan of the Facebook or Twitter right now. So.
And our political leaders don't really like to use Facebook because the moment they post something, then they get a lot of really negative comments.
Yeah, I have to agree on the Japanese using Twitter because that's how I track my friend's lifeline. 2 years ago, when the earthquake happened, on the Twitter line, my friend suddenly went missing for 3 days. We were so worried about him. I thought he was in Tohoku area, and I started emailing everyone. It's like, have you seen him? Have you seen him? So and then he started tweeting again. 3 days after that, I was like, oh, he's fine. So, and then he said, I went to he took pictures and all that stuff, so he went missing for 3 days because he was taking pictures of the Tohoku area. So, yeah, it's a big thing. I have to agree on that. So.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think Line application, does anybody here know what Line is? Yes. It's by Korean company, actually.
Yeah, it's made by a South Korean company, but it took off much more in Japan than in South
Yeah,
Korea.
yeah. So it's really, I think it's actually outnumbering soon. I think it's going to outnumber Twitter, and so I think basically the basic is that Japanese loves those apps and also technological tools.
How many of you use Line here? A show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. You must absolutely try it.
I mean, I don't really have questions, but I just want to share, some of the things that you've been touched on. I'm a reporter from Thailand, and Twitter has been really important in reporting stories there. And even my stations, they actually use the tweets of the reporters to be counted as a job improvement as well. The more we tweet the news, the more we get the higher paycheck by the end of the year. That's how we do it, because we kind of integrate the social media into news reporting. But at the same time, Yeah, exactly. They actually required the reporters to tweet at least.
So do you have a work tweet and a
Yeah.
personal tweet? Oh, wow.
So basically, they require all journalists to tweet at least 30 tweets a month, and that's the requirement. That's like and that's the minimum tweets. But the thing is, when you mention Line is, but the thing at the same time, Line I find it to be kind of more personal than Twitter's, because it's kind of like it's more of the instant messaging between you and your friends, and I think many companies are taking advantage of that by kind of promoting their Line accounts. I mean I find it to be a little bit more. I want to use Line to be just a personal communication between me and my friends, not kind of
Are you
the
aware of
commercial way.
a software called WeChat?
I'm sorry?
WeChat is a QQ Tencent product.
No, we actually don't use that in Thailand.
Oh, okay.
It's not that popular. I think Line and Twitter are very important, and using hashtag is also a very big part of in the Twitter in Thailand as well. We also hashtag both English and Thai.
So do you still have your censorship issues in Thailand?
I think the only thing that's kind of the things that the journalists like us are keep in mind in Thailand is the lèse majesté law. That's actually the only thing that have to be concerned of, that you cannot criticize or making any comments on the royal family, and that's the kind of the only issue. Yeah.
I think he brings up a good point. I wonder if all of you could talk about using Twitter as reporters. In some ways, does this make you less circumspect because you have to reply to stories so quickly? You end up having to respond to them rather than thinking about them and being perhaps more thoughtful. Just a quick response from all of you. Who had a question?
I find Twitter really helpful because it helps me find my sources who's interested in a certain topic that I want to get quotes about. For example, if I have to get quotes about someone stuck in the airport, I can go on Twitter and search about whether somebody has tweeted about being stuck in the airport and how that's bad. But then I would not quote someone directly on the Twitter. I'll try to direct message or mention that person and ask so that we can have a phone call to make sure that the person is really stuck in the airport. Yeah. So it was really helpful finding a source. Yeah.
I don't like to think Twitter as the source, as a means to distribute news, but rather I would like to see Twitter being used as a form to promote news. That means you have written your story and then you put it on, and then you will put a link on Twitter and tell people about the story. Because as you tweet about the story, you see most stories don't happen that way. You have to go back and think about it and write. I think that's what journalists do, right? Yeah. So
I think as reporter also has to harness on media literacy per se. Like there are so many false information and correct information especially after the March 11th disaster. There are so many not clear or not correct information circulated the Twitter phase, and that was really damaging the entire conversation. So I try not to depend on the source, but at the same time it's really helpful to see the trend. And if I see a lot of comments, similar comments, I try to confirm and probably reach out to some of the Twitter user and then maybe interview or something. But
also actually
yeah, I'm not sure whether Jerry will agree with me on this. Now I think Facebook page of the politician in Malaysia is slowly becoming like the CV. If I would like to know a politician, I would just go there and see what he did on Facebook, what he updated. And if I normally go to a ruling party politician, most probably he has nothing on the Facebook. So people don't trust that. So, he did nothing. So just based on the Facebook page, they make the conclusion that. So
I think in the past we rely on a web page, but now you rely on the fan page. I don't know if this is the case in any other countries. At least for Malaysia, that's the case. Right.
I think LDP or other opposition parties are actually requiring its candidate to at least open up their account with the Twitter and the Facebook, because they regulate the internet in the upcoming election, as I told you. And I think Abe is really, really big on Facebook. He updates, comments, and you know, there's thousands of comments that's actually following his comments. So I think Abe is getting windfall from this movement, actually.
Okay, just to wrap it up here, we're running out of time. So if each of you could just briefly talk about the stories that are going to be coming out of your regions soon, what you think is going to be interesting to our audience, and how it's going to be covered on the internet.
Well, I just want to talk about in South Korea, to be a good reporter, I think you have to pay attention to what's going on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, Kakao Story, because there has been recent instances that started out on YouTube or Kakao Talk and became really viral and covered by mainstream media, and then really brought out changes on corporate behavior. Like so to beat other to be competition and to be quick to cover, to find out about these things, such as there were I don't want to go into too much details about this, but there were incidents where corporate companies had to force someone to leave who had a very bad behaviors on board to flight attendants, and that incident became only known through social media at first, but later it got hugely covered by mainstream media, and that person had to leave their job.
Also, President Park's spokesperson recently on bad behavior in the United States. And
Yeah,
that must
that
have made
was-
some Twitter traffic.
Yeah, that also first got posted on this online community in the U.S. and then picked up by mainstream media later. So that's many times I think South Korean journalists find themselves getting tips about news stories or breaking stories online, and these stories can have potential to change the behavior of corporations or politicians. Yeah.
Jerry?
The recent general election in Malaysia, because there were large-scale suspected fraud, I wouldn't say they're real or not. So a lot of Malaysians are putting up petitions online, petitioning to the U.S. government for foreign intervention into cleaning up our elections. So I think that's one area that maybe we can look at. The other area is the widespread arrest. They are arresting people now, and also the large-scale gatherings of people using internet as the means to mobilize. 50,000 people turned up yesterday in a field in Malaysia. So things like that are happening in Malaysia. So maybe that's one area we can look at. Yeah.
I think it's. I think we really have to be careful, like especially when the tensions among three nations are really intense. Like there's like very negative conversations going on the Facebook, Twitter, and and the internet sphere. And NHK reported that there's like a format where Japanese can actually go to, and then his comments automatically translated into Chinese. And then there's like a very negative, conversation going on. So, but at the same time, I covered about this like internet impact on like Japanese right wing movement. But at the same time, I think there are the avid Twitter users or politically slanted like Twitter users tend to be very right wing, and I think it's kind of have to understand that those people are not, their voice are not really prevalent. I think they represents the minority. That's I just wanted to highlight.
The internet does seem to be a double-edged sword for us in the fact that we can use it to report, but we also have to get the comments from that reporting back to us fairly
And the kind of
quickly.
friends we keep. You see, if all our friends support somebody, and then you will get this feel-good feeling that somebody is going to win. But the thing is, you only have this group of friends. If you widen your friendship spread, then you realize maybe it's not so. So I think that's also...
That seems to be an internet
Yes,
phenomenon, that we focus and we
Yes.
reflect only what we want to see.
Yes, and we are misinforming ourselves, which is really bad.
We've run out of time here. A big round of applause for our panelists for their informed comments, and thank you all for joining today. Hopefully you learned something. Thank you.
So you based here? Or?
I'm based in Tokyo.
So we're going to take a 10-minute break and then just be back here for our final panel. Go ahead and grab some coffee you need to. 12 o'clock, be right back here for our last panel and then for the raffle. So get ready and buy some tickets if you haven't.
think I had 35, 36, 40, 41, 43, or 42.
Why would you remember your raffle ticket number?
I'm just making these up.
Introducing the same people over and
You don't have to introduce Paul.
Yeah, don't introduce. You could just introduce.
Just
Bobby,
go. They're here.
Bobby and Doris.
And now.
Somebody asked me though, are you a member of AJ? Are you on? You're on.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Mike.
Good afternoon. If you could take your seats, please. If anyone is still outside, please come on in if you can hear this announcement. All right, so we're going to start our last panel. Oh, actually, yeah. Before we start our last panel, just a quick reminder that this is also your last chance to buy raffle tickets because we're going to do the drawing immediately after this.
What can they win?
And they can win. What can you win? What's the biggest prize that you guys can win?
Round-trip tickets on Cathay Pacific.
Right, round-trip tickets on Cathay Pacific from Hong Kong to anywhere in Asia.
To more than 50 destinations throughout Asia.
Thank you, flight attendant Paul.
And we also have 4 Xiaomi smartphones. We also have bottles of wine. We have an autographed book by Cheryl Tan, AAJ member. We also have a set of DVDs courtesy of Choreo Tours. Some very cool stuff there. All right, so to kick off our last panel, I'm basically just going to hand it over to Ken because we've already introduced these folks over and over and over again. I think the one person who we haven't is Bobby Calvan, head of AAJ Media Watch. And he flew over from Washington, D.C. So I'm going to hand it over to Ken Mortsugu, AAJ National Vice President for Print, to carry it on.
I can use this, I think. Does this work? Hello? Hi. So I'm the Vice President of AAJ. I'm also the former Asia Chapter President. I'm based in Bangkok. And we've had a really wonderful, wonderful conference. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming. And hope you've had a good time and learned a lot and so forth. I just wanted to wrap up this conference with this panel to take advantage of the fact that we have so many national leaders of AAJ from the U.S. who have come out to join us for this conference, join us at this conference for the first time this year. And we're privileged to have not only the current president of AAJ, but his 2 predecessors as president. We have Paul, as you know, is the
My Bush and Clinton.
Exactly.
Oh!
Which
You
is
mean
which.
JFK?
And before Paul, Doris was the president for the previous 2 years, and then before that, Sharon was the president. So it's really wonderful to have that kind of support from the national organization. I think it also shows that how far we've come in developing our group out here in Asia. And the other person, as Ramy mentioned, that's joining us from Washington, D.C., is Bobby Calvan, who's the national board rep for the Washington chapter and also head of a program called AAJ Media Watch. So I wanted to take the opportunity today, just briefly, because I know you're all waiting for the raffle, to talk a little bit about AAJ and what it stands for, and the issue of diversity, which is one of our core issues. I think that the Asia chapter, of course, was founded by members like Alan Cheng in the back there, who were members in the U.S. who moved out to Asia. And as increasing numbers of Asian American journalists moved out to Asia, saw the need for forming a chapter here. But then our growth has really exploded in the last 2 or 3 years. And a lot of that growth has been kind of organic within Asia. It's not people who came from the U.S., but just people who are already out here in Asia working and wanted to join us. And that's been terrific. And we've had a really great run. And I think it's going to continue. At the same time, I think that this is an opportunity to, because we have these national leaders here, to talk a little bit about what is AAJ, what does it stand for in the U.S., and what are the issues, the diversity issues that we all care about so much. So just what I wanted to do was just go through, talk a little bit about, or having our panelists talk a little bit about what is diversity and why it is important in the media industry. And then talk a little about the state of diversity, where we are in sort of the movement to improve and increase diversity within media newsrooms in the U.S. And then, if we have time permitting, I'd like to talk a little bit about Asia and maybe hear a little bit from you guys about, is diversity an issue in Asia? Should it be? And have kind of a discussion among AJ and Asia about, is this something that we want to think about and talk about a little more going forward as we mature as a chapter and organization. So let's start first with the issue of sort of what is diversity and why is it important? And I don't know who wants to define diversity for us. And it's kind of obvious, but do you want to take a shot, Mr. President?
I mean, I think there's the obvious, definition of diversity. So, and then there's also the not so obvious definition of diversity. I think at least in the U.S., when people think about diversity, they really think about minority advancement or LBGT and women, But when I think about diversity, it goes beyond ethnicity and gender. It really goes to, the core of coverage. Do we have diversity economically? Do we have diversity in disciplines? I think I'm the second national president that represent visual in AAJA. I think Victor was the only other one. Do we have diversity, among geography? So it's great that we have a large Asia presidents before, because, like Ken said, I think you guys bring the A into Asia.
The Asian intake.
Yeah.
AJ.
Yeah. So, I think, and also diversity include the majority, because to be truly diversity, I think I prefer to use the term inclusive, being inclusive rather than diversity.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So I wanted to ask the panelists to talk a little bit about why we think diversity or inclusiveness is important in the news media. Why do we need it? And I think I'm going to start with Bobby, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about our activities in Media Watch and what we do with that. Explain what that is to the audience.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me tell you that one of the questions I get asked a lot in the States is, where am I from? And sounds like a simple question that would ordinarily deserve a simple answer, but it's rather complicated. As Asian Americans, we are this, sometimes perpetual, seemingly perpetual, foreigner, because of what we look like, what we eat, perhaps even our names. So we have this sense of being different in many ways through the eyes of many people we live with, work with, people we come across in the U.S. And a lot of that oftentimes spills into what we see on the TV news, what we read in newspapers and magazines. And Media Watch is one of the, what I think is one of the most important programs in, AJA, because our job is to monitor what is written about our communities. And oftentimes what is written about our communities can be rather harmful because they're not accurate, they're not fair, and news companies need to know that, hey, we're watching, we would like to be written about in a fair way that doesn't damage our communities and how other people perceive us. I mean, there's a former New York Times Pulitzer Prize winner, Joel Brinkley, who now teaches at Stanford University journalism. And he was in Vietnam recently, and he wrote a column about his experience in Vietnam, And it was fine for him to write about what he saw. But when it came across the ocean, a lot of people got upset about the fact that he had pictures of skinned rats, of how the fact that Vietnamese eat meat, and that explains why they are aggressive. Again, his observations, but it was also very harmful to a lot of the Vietnamese communities. Does that explain why there are Vietnamese gangs? Does that mean that Vietnamese people are naturally aggressive and we should be afraid of them? So a lot of things that are written about us, shouldn't be written about us, for one thing. And we need the help of everybody here, whether or not in the U.S. or here in Asia to make sure that what's written about us is accurate and fair. So that's what our job is.
Let me just interject. Does that mean that the media should not be critical of Asian Americans?
There's a difference between being critical of Asian Americans or
write critical stories about Asian Americans?
No, I don't think they should be writing critical stories about Asian Americans. They should be writing critical stories about what Asian Americans do wrong, but not about us. Again, it's like this whole debate about whether or not we should use the word or the phrase illegal immigrant. We shouldn't brand people. We can describe and perhaps criticize the actions that they take and look at that's merits, but just because we're Asian Americans, I don't think that we deserve any scrutiny because of it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let me move on to Doris because she was telling me earlier that the Washington Post has a new diversity policy, and there was considerable debate and discussion went into what exactly that policy should be. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that is and how that plays out in American newsrooms.
Yeah, just to clarify, there's a diversity committee at the Post, and I'm one of the co-chairs, and our committee is getting started on really trying to be strategic about our hiring and ensuring that the people who are already in the newsroom feel like they are getting opportunities for professional development and growth, because we want people who are Post-quality candidates to stay and be a part of the company and grow with the company and do good work. So I'm just going to read you the mission statement because it's short, and it's for the committee itself. It says that the Diversity Committee's biggest role will be in shaping how people from diverse backgrounds are hired and developed in the Washington Post newsroom. We strive to be open about our process, and we welcome input. We define diversity as a means to help the Post achieve its journalistic goals because there's value for everyone, especially consumers of Post journalism, in a newsroom staff equipped to cover a variety of communities and issues. And part of the lengthy discussion was, what is diversity? And it's like an onion. There's just layer after layer after layer. Just like Paul was saying, there's the economic, there's the geography, there's religion. I feel like a very few people who are journalists, at least in the US, have experience working in the military or even have family members who are military members. So that's a significant portion of the American population. And for us to be reporting on it, but to not actually have the familiarity can pose a challenge when you're trying to report on something that you just don't really understand, like the culture, because obviously the military has its own very specific culture. Those kinds of things, that's what we want to think about, and we really want to help bring that kind of diversity into our newsroom because that reflects the community that we're reporting on.
Can I add something on why diversity is important? The reason diversity is important, and you may not see this in Asia, but the journalism industry is shrinking in the US. Papers, their print advertising revenue is going down, there are layoffs, and at the Seattle Times, our newsroom is half the size it used to be. And I think that one of the reasons the industry is shrinking is because it is not relevant to the current population of the United States. Diversity is a business imperative. So if 26% of America is made up of racial minorities, only 13% of them are represented in newsrooms. And we're not even at that point looking at the stories and what the stories are about. So I agree that diversity, with what Paul said, that diversity is about many different things, but if the US journalism industry wants to survive, it first needs to represent who Americans are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, Sharon. Do you also want to talk, Sharon is also on the editorial board of the Seattle Times, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about diversity on the editorial board and what that means.
Sure. I think the Seattle Times, under the leadership of our former managing editor, Alex McLeod, really became a leader. In the 80s, they set a goal. We want to be at parity with Seattle. And so the Seattle Times, I think, is about 26% people of color. But as we've shrunk, I recently looked around and I was like, oh, there are no Asian Americans on our Metro desk. There are no Asian American Metro reporters. There are no Asian American Metro editors. And the reason I noticed this was when the Kenneth Bay story happened, on the editorial board, we were all over it. And I think part of that was because of my relationship with AAJA and having been president when Roxana, Saberi, Laura Ling, and Yuna Lee were all detained. So I was like, we need to jump in and we need to say something. And as a result, the editorial board has really been driving the coverage forward on Kenneth Bae's detention. And to the point where I'm kind of wondering, like, where is the newsroom? And I look at the newsroom, and I think one of the reasons is because there are not Asian Americans in the newsroom. On the editorial board, we have 2 Asian American women. And I also think the other issue is that, you know what, reporters do stories that are easy. A lot of reporters, especially when you have constrained resources, you need to be like filling the news hole each day. It's hard to report on the Korean American community. And if you don't understand that, you know, there's a level of distrust with the media, discomfort with talking to the media, being on the record, then if you're a reporter, you might just turn around and make the phone calls, and if they don't call you back, go work on a different story.
Sure. I'm watching the clock here carefully so we don't run over too much. But before I move on to the state of diversity, I kind of wanted to hear from the audience and to see, I don't know how much of this is new to you or what you've heard, if you've heard this all before sort of thing. But let's just take 5 minutes maybe for, are there any questions or observations from the audience? Raise your hand. 2 in front here.
Is Yu Kyung, AP Technology writer. I'm not very familiar with diversity in the U.S. media. I grew up in South Korea, so I have a question about whether your efforts to promote diversity stretches to making sure what kind of coverage Asian American journalists cover. Like, do they show really? How does it make a difference? Do they really make a difference if there are more Asian American journalists represented in the newsroom? And is that also part of what diversity committee follows? Like what kind of coverage they cover?
Well, let me speak to that as a reporter. As an Asian American, I can go to my editors and say, hey, this is what I saw in my neighborhoods, because where I lived and the communities that I live in happen to be populated with a lot of Asian Americans, you know. So as a person who lives in that community, I can go to my editor and say, you know, this festival or whatever event or some, you know, concern is bubbling up within the Filipino community, for example. You know, so I can actually advocate within my newsroom that we cover certain stories that might be of interest to, I think, everybody in the community, but in particular to the communities that I'm a part of. And again, going back to what Sharon said, you know, newspapers are missing a big part of the market because they're not, you know, addressing the issues that are important to a lot of ethnic communities. So as a reporter, I made sure that I voiced what I needed to voice within my, you know, editors, my editors, and got stories in the paper. Even if I didn't do it, you know, I would go and suggest, hey, maybe somebody on Metro should cover this. Or even within my own beat, I used to cover healthcare in Sacramento. You know, I would find people and purposely find people so that my stories are populated with different types of names. Whether or not they're Asian sounding, you know, you can't really tell whether or not a person is you know, black or white sometimes. Can't even tell my name sometimes whether or not I'm Asian. But I try and populate them with different types of names, whether or not it's Latino or obvious, you know, a Japanese name. I go out searching for them, and because I think that's my responsibility to do that and let other people within the community at large realize that, you know, our community's a diverse community.
Well, I mean, besides getting people who are reporting, it's really important to get people who are diverse in the leadership ranks, and that's where we really struggle. 4 of the publishers of newspapers in the United States happen to be Asian American, and 2 of them are graduates of our executive leadership program. But there are very few people who are senior managers in the broadcast industry. I'm not sure if there are any owners of online-only newsrooms that are Asian American. There might be, because there are so many ways to slice that niche. But the Huffington Post ownership is not diverse. So you have to think that, if somebody's controlling the pocketbook, they can also drive what kind of things are important priorities to cover. And AAJA has also helped in trying to get things that aren't necessarily going to be reported on by working on media access. We work with underrepresented communities in the United States to help people like the Hmong community or other groups that aren't necessarily well represented to learn how to work with the media. That if you give us a news release on the day of your event, it's probably not going to get covered. If you have some sort of major crisis, you need to have a designated person to speak on your behalf. And maybe that person isn't your organization's president. You want the person who can best articulate your perspective to a larger audience. And some of our chapter leaders are very active about sending out information to their chapter members about possible areas of coverage. Like, some sort of news release that maybe only hit that chapter president. They'll send it out to the wider membership, and I've seen some of our members go and make reports and do stories about something that came through that route. So that's kind of how we try to help get those stories out there.
I think Hannah had a question, our vice president from Seoul.
Hello, everyone. As you guys know, I'm Hannah from Seoul. I feel like as an American working in South Korea, part of diversity is also, in Seoul at least, Korea is typically has traditionally been a very homogeneous society, and it's opening up a lot. And I think that organizations like AAJA that emphasize diversity can be an example to populations that are becoming more diverse and creating better understanding. I know that in Seoul in particular, we have a really diverse group of members, like many who are not American. I'm not a full-time journalist. It's a really big mix of people, and I think that it helps people become more open-minded and understanding. It's not like, oh, isn't Asia weird? It's like, oh, this is Asia. We get it. This is our home. So that's something that I think that AAJA Asia really offers.
I think Eric had a question.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't we go to Sean first, and then to Eric in the back. Sean, sorry, up there on our AAJA Asia chapter treasurer.
Sean.
Oh.
Well, I'm Sean, AJ Seoul. I've been in Seoul for about 5 years, but I do remember, working in Asian American media and all the struggle, all the angst. But then I take one plane ride, I go to Korea, I'm suddenly part of the majority, and it completely is a different perspective. And then it really does. Seeing it from the other side, and then seeing, like, not to use Jack as an example, but he goes on a plane ride to Korea too, works there, he becomes part of the minority. And so you could kind of see that, these issues are, very relevant. But I guess my question is, what can we do as the Asia chapter with a different perspective? Like, I guess we have more of the majority perspective, or maybe some of the resources. What can we do to help the broader chapters over in these states?
I think, as businesses become more international, it's really important for Asia chapter to really voice in on coverage. So when Japan tsunami happened, or when the Sichuan earthquake happened, or when, all these coverage about China and, their food supply happened, it's really important for Asia chapter to say, what, how do you actually cover Asia? Like, how do you cover a country as interesting as China, where, a lot of times in the US we use Twitter, we use Facebook as some sources, but we don't have that in China. So how do we go about covering China for the US media? So I think, as stories become more globalized, I think we need to become more globalized. We need to be more sensitive, not only to what's going on within the US, but also what's going on, in other parts of the world. Now there's a lot of Asia influence in Latin America because of China's growing demand of natural resources. So, when we think about how AAJ could expand, part of our mission is to really just educate newsroom throughout, the world. How do we actually properly cover a country? There's not that many foreign correspondents running around. That pool is shrinking. So the local expertise become increasingly more important, and it needs to be more integrated. There's no longer us versus them. There's no, foreign correspondent. Like, you are a journalist, that's it. every one of us is foreign correspondent in some way. I do interactive, and that could be really foreign for some people.
I mean, I would say a basic thing would be for members of the Asia chapter to be on Media Watch and be able to offer expertise on stories about Asia. Well, this is kind of like, Vietnamese people eating rats. That's not a very sophisticated story. That's poor journalism.
Well, another example, and I forget the details, and maybe you can remember, Doris, the story out of Japan, Tokyo, and that word in the lead.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Somebody who's based in Tokyo had written a column, and he had used in the lead the typically docile Japanese. And that just jumped out at me, because it's a phrase that like stereotypes that are positive, like, oh, all Asians are great at math, are equally harmful. So that's something that just kind of jumped out at me, and I posted it to Media Watch, not to say, oh, we need to go and strike in front of this person's building, but just what do other folks think? And the interesting perspective was from some of our members who have lived and worked in Tokyo, and they all said, we sort of see what your point is, but also that's just how they would describe it. That being and living in Japan, that's something that is not necessarily uncommon, and that they would describe themselves that way in terms of protests. That was the context of it, that the Japanese typically do not protest. And I just said, well, I thought that there could have been a potentially different word other than docile. And so I did send a note directly to the writer, and he wrote back, I didn't really think about that. Thank you so much. I will look into AAJA. I'm not sure if he ended up joining the Tokyo subchapter, but that's something that we should probably follow up on, because I think that it's good to have that person's perspective as well.
And also the nuances is so different from country to country. So even if you're using a word to describe something in English, but when you translate that into Chinese to Vietnamese to Cambodian, it could have a complete different connotations. And I mean, I can't help to bring out this example which is not Asian related. It's actually Spanish at the Miami Herald, where we did a story about this TV reporter using this word that really is about this fish grouper. But in Colombian, they interpret that as a derogatory term for homosexuals. But in Venezuelan, that word is nothing harmful about it. So I think, again, as stories travel throughout the regions, there's a lot more nuances that we need to be more attuned to. How does, one word or one phrase or one image that you're projecting play out not only in the U.S. but in Asia or in Latin America or in Europe?
Eric, I'll come back to you in a second. I just wanted to bring Jeremiah Fu into the conversation. Raise your hand so the mic can come to you. Jeremiah, as many of you know, is a professor here and at Shantou University in China. He's also worked in Malaysia extensively as a journalist. And Malaysia is quite an interesting country, as many of you know, because it is very ethnically and racially diverse, somewhat parallel to the U.S. And I just wanted to get his perspective on both Malaysia and China and diversity, and what does it mean in Asia?
Okay, in Malaysia, we have three main races: Chinese, Malay, and Indian. I write for a technology paper called InTech under the star. So within the paper itself, we have 12 people on the desk, and only one of us studied journalism. We have one doctor. I'm an architect. We have a petrochemical engineer. We have a psychologist. So it's a very diverse mix of people from different background and different ethnic background. So the psychologist is an Indian. Then the doctor is a Chinese, and there's an American Chinese who is a petrochemical engineer. So when you have all these people come together, we argue on stories, and we have this whiteboard on the paper on the wall that says longest word of the day. So we actually look down at people who use big words. So the moment you use a very big word, and then we'll put that word on the wall, and then that's it. We'll laugh at you for the whole day. But it's a good practice, because it gives us more, what's that word? Sensitivity to different issues.
Long word.
right? Yeah, I know. Sensitivity, oh, that's 5. Wow, that's quite bad. But it keeps you on the toe because because the guy next door who is looking at your story will tell you, hey, So we try to be very careful when we do that, and but we see the divide more clear on the political desk, because then you see a lot of, because the language barrier is a problem. You need to speak Malay if you want to interview some political figures and all that. And sometimes I'm being called to cover political stories because they have no choice. I'm the only Chinese-speaking guy on the desk, so they have to send me to cover Chinese stories. So those things, but the thing is, when you're the only guy who knows that language or that subject matter, you become that expert on the desk, and then your opinion becomes very important because it directs the tone of the story, right? And that's when we have to be really careful. And I find that kind of diversity makes us a better journalist, I think. I feel that way. That's my experience. And I spent 7 years there doing crazy things, including stalking people. Okay.
I mean, I think
we all do that.
Just to go to what Sean spoke about, you guys are the majority, but I would look to who are the people sitting up here at the Asia News Bureau chief panel. I mean, it was 2 white men and 1 Asian woman, and white people can be the most effective diversity advocates. They can write about diversity issues. They can be amazing experts on Asia, but really the whole narrative of Asia and journalism to the rest of the world has historically been told through colonial powers who are European and American. So when you think about diversity, who are the people running the show? Who are the people running that show from America who decide how many resources go towards the Asia bureaus, which would in turn determine how many job opportunities there are here for you in Asia? If you work for a foreign journalism organization. So there is a connection between diversity in America and whether you can get a job here.
And part of the conversations that at least I have with a lot of the media companies, whether it's News Corp or Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and one of the questions I push for, how many percentage of the journalists that you hire are local, and what is it that you're seeing that they need additional training on, or not? What are some of the area expertise that you could bring back to the mothership in U.S., elsewhere? So I think a lot of Sharon is exactly right, because when you look at who's running the show, they're not Asian. I mean, why can't there be a head of Wall Street Journal Asia that is born and raised in Hong Kong and educated in Hong Kong? I mean, so until we produce that type of quality of work, or to be able to help them find that candidate, the control will always be, someone else's. And this is Asia. I mean, there's a lot of people here. I'm surely we could find talented people.
And I mean, I think a diversity issue is the 2-tier system in these bureaus. I mean, how local reporters' hires are treated and how hires from the US or whatever the native country is. Do you want to go to Eric?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you, Eric? You've been waiting patiently. Why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Eric Wee, and many of you know me. I run AsiaMediaJobs.com. But the other thing I do also, as you know, is I run JournalismNext.com in the States, and it's a job website for journalists of color. We try to increase the number of minority journalists working in U.S. newsrooms. But one of the things, this is an observation that we've noticed, is that the main place where this is a problem right now is in online media. Our observation is that a lot of these online sites, which are growing, are all white. And a lot of the issues that they're dealing with are the issues that the newspapers dealt with 20, 30 years ago. And they have the same justification, is we can't find the people that are qualified, the programmers, the people that have the video skills that are white. And our argument to them is that there's plenty of people that can fill that are candidates of color. So I just thought maybe you could comment about that.
This is something the Online News Association is thinking critically about. So I'm on their diversity committee, and so as we think about the type of candidates, they do need to diversify, and they understand that. But again, where are the candidates? Even within the AHA membership, when I'm looking across all of our members, qualified members who could do web development and understand journalism is very limited. There's not that many. So we need to really, look at what is it that our industry needs, and who are some of the candidates. I mean, I could count with one hand of like maybe less than 5 people I could recommend. If someone say, hey, I'm looking for a digitally savvy journalist who could do coding and who really understand, social media. I mean, there could be a lot of candidates in Asia, but I don't know them because they're not AHA members or they work for local media. So, so part of, getting the talent is you have to make yourself visible. So I think, in this conference alone, we did one workshop on, inviting the newsroom leaders because we want to make sure they know you exist. Right? And then we did a follow-up sessions on, general leadership because we need our members and just, journalists within Asia to be more visible to everybody, not just within Asia. But, again, the world is, more and more connected these days, and you can't just work in silos. So if you really, want to make a breakout, then you need to make yourself noticeable, at least to, AHA, so that we know if someone come to us and say, hey, I'm looking for this and this and this, then I'm just like, well, I have 5 people in the US, but there could be like thousands in Asia that I don't know.
Well, I would just say great point. Thank you for bringing that up because I had no idea it was so hard to find Asian engineers. But, on the Seattle Times web team, when I was on the web team, I worked with 3 other Asian Americans. The social media producer was Indian American, Katrina Barlow was mixed race, Japanese American, Laura Rubino was half Filipino American, so they're out there. I think they're making the same excuses they made in the 80s.
Great. We're almost out of time, and I know you're all eagerly awaiting the raffle. But let me let Alan Cheng, our founder, ask the final question here or make the final comment.
Right, this is just a very final comment. I was just talking to Ching Ching, actually. And we were talking about perhaps next year what we can do is bring in more executives, news executives from Asian media companies. And there are a good number of Asian media companies that are expanding globally. Chinese companies, CCTV, and even Shanghai Media Group, and there are companies out of Japan and elsewhere. So we in AHA Asia, I think we should make it a goal for next year to do that outreach, to reach out to the Asian media executives, bring them in so they can give us their perspectives, and perhaps we can act as a bridge to help the senior executives of the Wall Street Journal or News Corp or whoever to interact with their counterparts here in Asia. And so I think Sharon brought up a very good point about the colonialism of the media, the dissemination of information over the last many, many decades is perhaps as we can help be a bridge to mitigate that and not make it, and to give Asians a voice globally as well, Asian media executives. Yeah.
And just to point out, 2 of the major hire in this year's media company, you have someone from Britain who's now running NBC. And then the New York Times, also have someone British, and Wall Street Journal when Murdoch first bought, they bought someone from British. So, where are the Asia top leaders? They could one day actually run a global media organization, whether it's headquartered, in Asia or in US or in Europe. So, I think as one market shrinks and another markets will expand, and I think it's really important for Asia to position itself, where are the top leaders now? And, some of the next executive is sitting here or been to this conference, and what is it that we could do this year and next year in AHA to help you get to that point? So, it's great that we have people who come to the conference, but it'd be better if you guys give us the feedback. Say, what is it that you really want to see next year? And what could we do to help you get there? And once you get there, then you have to kind of participate, beyond just, sitting in a panel.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for participating in this discussion. It's been very interesting. I'm sorry to have kind of a heavy talk at the end of the thing, but I think the raffle will liven it up a bit. And I do hope this is a conversation I think that AAJ members in Asia will continue in the coming months to figure out how we can play a bigger role and a deeper role and a more important role in this whole issue of diversity in the media going forward. So I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists who did come all the way from the U.S. just for this this conference. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. If you could just give us just maybe 2 minutes, just talk amongst yourselves as we just set up for the final thank yous as well as the raffle. Actually, as we take this time, if there's anyone else who really wants to buy any more raffle tickets, Wendy has just a few left right here as we set up. So just raise your hand if you want to, and she can come on over. Just a few final announcements, and then we'll get to the raffle, and then you can have a nice rest of the Sunday. Alan needs to stop talking. All right. All right. So first off, I just want to thank all of you for coming to this year's New Now Next International Media Conference. I want to make a few final thank yous. Excuse me. Thank you. So I want to make a few final thank yous. Most importantly to Professor Ying Chen. Ying, where are you? Ying, please come on down. Again, one more round of applause for Ying as our amazing sponsor, our amazing partner here at the Hong Kong University Journalism and Media Studies Center. Yes, and she's also a platinum member and has been an AJ stalwart for a very long time. Very, very long time. Thank you very, very much for that. Also, I want to say, in particular, because of Professor Chen and her personal contributions, she actually helped make the Myanmar panel actually happen. She helped to have the two, Suiwin and Mei Hein, travel over, so she basically paid for their expenses. So thank you very much for that, out of her own pocket. In addition, I want to say thank you to AJ Asia Chapter President Alan Chung, ever doing his duties with the name cards right there. But Alan, thank you very much for your support. He also gave a sizable donation towards AJ's programs this year. So thank you for that. Also, thank you to the folks behind the scenes. So, you know, you're seeing us around here, you're seeing the same faces and stuff, but the people who really made the nuts and bolts of this happen are the people who you might not have actually seen all that much. First off, definitely you have seen Wendy, but she's been the programming detail guru for everything that you've seen. She's put together, you know, things at 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning. And we have this WhatsApp group, actually, between Wendy started with me, her, Kevin, Eldis, and AJ, who is helping with the volunteers. And I swear that if we actually printed that out, we would probably kill a lot of trees. Because it's... when did it start? A couple months ago? 1 month? We would still kill a lot of trees. So I want to thank you, Wendy. In terms of logistics, Kevin Lau here at HKU, also AJ member, he's helped so much with the logistics here, and even diving even deeper than Kevin. If Kevin can't do it, Matthew Lung back there. Everything else has gone to him. So thank you so much for that. From the graphics, all the logistics, everything that you haven't seen. In addition, our social media guru, Eldis Tran, right here, helping out. Anything that gets tweeted out of the AAJ Asia account actually goes through her nimble hands right there. All the conference tweeting. Thank you. Thank you. And also for the volunteers, is AJ here? He's still working in the back. But AJ Liebenau, he was in charge and helping coordinate all of the volunteers here. And I know we have some volunteers here. If you could just raise your hand. Photography right here, camera, everything. Thank you very much, folks in the back. Thank you so much for being the glue to help it make all this work. And then finally, I want to give thanks to the chapter leaders. Hannah for bringing a huge delegation from Seoul, always being an awesome cheerleader and leader over there. Ching Ching, where are you? Ching Ching in the back, Vice President for China. And also to Yuri, who is now headed to the airport, but she's the sub-chapter Vice President for Tokyo. And let's see, who else? Sean, our chapter treasurer. And June, also coming from Seoul, sorry. It's been a long day, long weekend. Anyone else? Thank you. How about that? Just throw it all out there. Thank you. Also, is Sasha here? There he is. Sasha Vuchenik. If you pitched to his Indie Voices program, he's asked that to let everyone know that he's actually made a couple of choices, him and his Indie Voices Awards jury. So he's chosen 3 projects from the pitches that he heard yesterday, and he and the jury actually deliberated about, 3.5 hours, you said, Sasha? Yeah, so... okay. All right, so he says that he's chosen 3 projects that will all get mentoring and business skills development to prepare them for their projects for listing on Indie Voices. And Indie Voices will actually debut later this year, maybe sometime this summer, correct? And so if you're here, please raise your hand just so we know who you are. Anjani Trivedi and Olivia Rosenman. Thank you very much. They pitched a project called tabletalk.asia. It's a platform to start common sense dialogue about violence against women. Also, Suiwin. Suiwin, are you here? Okay, great, thank you. Suiwin came from Yangon, Myanmar, and he has a project to establish a new web-based news site in the country as the press freedoms open up over there over the last few years since 2010. And also Melissa Cronenberg. Melissa, are you here? All right, she's not here, but Melissa proposed a gaming project that deals with the increasing incidence of depression in women. So thank you to all of you guys and congratulations there. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. The raffle. So, yeah, right. Yes, yeah. All right. How about you stand over here with Paul? Yeah. All right. So for the first, no, that's mine. Where's the book and the DVDs? No, I gave them all there with the phones. It's in your office? Yeah. Oh, they're all here. Okay, great. All right. The book first? Yes. Great. All right, so first off, make sure to get all of your tickets out. Do you have your tickets? Yeah? All right, I see them. All right, so for our first, yes, it's signed. For our first raffle prize, it is the book A Tiger in the Kitchen, which is by AAJA member Cheryl Tan, talking about, it's a food and cultural journey from her upbringing in Singapore. So go ahead and pull a number. And you have to name, sweet, and you have to name the color as well as number.
I think people can see the color, right?
Yes.
Number 40.
Pink 40. Pink 40? There's one there. Do it quickly. Jean? Okay. Okay, we'll hold on to that for her. Thank you. Yay! Congratulations, Jean Lee. Next up, we have the DVD set from Choreo Tours. I believe Simon left already, but thanks to Simon Cockerell, I think many of you went to his talk. I think they're in here. Yes, they're here. And the bag too, which is actually pretty cool. Here.
LAU, Friday night, gate night.
North Korea gets them going. All right. So the winner gets all 3 of these DVDs. Was that inappropriate? I'm sorry. All right, go ahead and pull the number and the color for that, Paul.
Pink 59.
Pink 59. Come on down. Oh, no, pink 59. Pink 59. There was going to be a smackdown there. Congratulations. And what is your name?
Liz Choi.
All right, Liz Choi. Thank you so much. All right, congratulations. Liz, you want to just pose for the camera right there, I guess, first? Next prize is wine.
Oh, where's the wine?
Where's the wine? Oh, all here. All right, so we have 12 bags of wine, 2 bottles each. So Paul is going to...
Delicious.
This is sponsored. Kevin, you want to tell us a little bit about the sponsor for this?
Just say they're awesome. They're a group of Australian wine experts. So if they're kind enough to sponsor 24 bottles of wine, because they knew this crowd needed some, and so if you guys didn't win, there's also coupons up here. So if you buy a case from them, they'll ship it to you for free. So it's a really great deal. Don't quote me on it. That's on camera.
With a flower in her red hair and a new purple dress. Jean looks
All right, so Paul is going to choose 12 tickets. 12 tickets at one go.
Yellow 64.
No, choose all. Get all of them first, and then just yeah. Or I guess you could. Whatever. Don't listen to me. Just say them. Yeah. Right. Hannah got wine? How inappropriate.
Purple 20. Yellow 36. Oh. Okay. Yellow 76. Jason Gatewood.
kind of a, is this a purple or is this beige? Gray. Gray 20. Yes, yellow 64. Yeah. So wait, how many did we?
No, how many have you drawn? 1, 2.
How many got a bottle of wine so far?
There are only 2 here.
2, and then Hana 3. Okay. Okay. So who's yellow 76?
Not here.
Not here.
Okay.
Okay. Gray 20. And another. Well, I don't want to be stereotyped. I just noticed a pattern. I'll leave it at that. It's all the AHA So subchapter are getting wine. Pink 32. Pink 32. Ah. Green 92. Woo!
And AJ has been in charge of all the student volunteers, so keeping in charge of them. What do you say?
I need it. Right, how many did we draw so far?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 more.
How many do we have left? 6. Okay. Pink 29.
Pink 29.
Pink 29. Woohoo!
Congratulations, Reed.
Gray 65. Gray 65. Oh, congratulations. And then, how many more do we have to pull? 4 more. Okay. And the next lucky winner is Gray 75. Gray 75.
You mean 50.
For 100 Hong Kong dollars, I can make that. Yay! Okay. Next lucky winner, green 45. I see him a pattern, a lot of 5s. Oh, I see. After party at AJ So subchapter.
That's so appropriate.
Okay. Pink 70. Pink 70.
Sorry? Oh, I won that.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I'm putting that back.
Thank you. Y'all can close it by yourselves.
And the last winner is yellow 65. Yellow 65.
65.
Anyone? 65? Anyone?
Once, going twice, or we pull again? Pull again.
What about? Gray 39. Oh, and another Korean. I see. Okay. Well, I hope you like red. I think that's all the wine, right?
Okay, great. Great. All right. And then next up, we have 4. The stakes are getting higher now. We have 4 Xiaomi smartphones. Right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once again, thank you to Richard Lai of Engadget for helping us with this sponsorship. Richard Lai is editor-in-chief for Engadget China. So let's just pick one at a time and see who's here.
Gray 44. Yay!
Congratulations. Yes, you get a picture. You want a picture? Video. How do you feel? How do you feel?
So just call me maybe, okay? Pink 37. Oh, 7. Well, now you could drunk text your friends with your wine.
With your wine.
Anyone want to buy some raffle tickets? The chances are much better now.
Too late, too late.
Yellow 65. Did I call that number?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, no.
Yellow 77. I mean, no, pink. Pink 77. Woohoo! Oh!
Last year's winner of the Cathay Pacific trip. So you can't win anything else, all right? So sorry. No, I'm kidding. So, yeah, go ahead. Congratulations.
You know what? I think there's a Mega Millions coming up in New York. I'm going to go into a ticket with her. Or a quick trip to Macau. Okay, the final foam winner is Gray 72. Yay! Thank you. Yay! Is this the Grand Poobah?
This is the Grand.
Oh, the Grand Poobah.
So, actually, let me just say this. So, all right, and finally for the grand prize in this folder are 2 round-trip tickets from Hong Kong to anywhere in Asia. Your choice, of course. I'd like to have Ellen Wong, AAJA member from Cathay Pacific, come down, please, as well. Everyone, please give a round of applause to Ellen as she represents Cathay Pacific. She's also an AAJA member on the communications side, so thank you very much for that. So, should we have Ellen pick? Should we have Ellen pick? All right, Ellen, you really have to... You have to dig in there. Yeah, take your time, take your time. Oh yeah. Okay, what's all right, so check. Who has
77? No.
77.
There's 4 possible winners, but only one of you will be the 8. How many people have 77? Just one. Please come on down. Come on down.
Wait.
No.
Color? What color are you? What color? What color is your ticket?
Wait.
What color is your ticket? Is that?
It's great.
Is it gray? All right, just say,
Come on down!
Come on, yeah.
Woo!
How's it?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. We need to verify. We need to verify.
We need to double source this. All right. Wait, no, that's 11. No. LL. Congratulations, Zing. If anyone deserved it, it is actually Professor Chan. So everyone, congrats, Zing. Where are you going to go, Professor Chan?
It's not cooked. It's not. Now I have to take a holiday. Yes. And now I have to, right?
It's holiday.
All right, thank you.
I am available. Do you have an idea of where you're going to go?
Oh, Myanmar. Well, maybe, yeah, okay.
And
we look forward to welcoming you soon.
And actually, speaking of Myanmar, Cathay Pacific just started flights on Dragonair to Yangon, right? Yeah.
In fact, in the last year, we launched, I think, more than 10 new routes on Dragonair. Yeah, within Asia. Then next year we have to sponsor another tickets for any ticket for any destination in our network. The longest flight that we have is to New York, 16 hours. But sorry, this year is only regional flights. But hope that you enjoy it.
And Cathay Pacific is part of the One World Alliance. If you haven't joined the loyalty program, feel free to sign up.
It's all on there.
Okay, just couple more minutes. Couple more minutes. Don't open up the wine yet. We have 2 video. So, AJ, so where's the after party? How many bottles do you guys have? 8? Right? 8 bottles of wine? We have one last secret raffle. If you all stay.
All right, so as we wrap up N3Con, Hong Kong University JMSC has put together a couple videos to remind us of the amazing time that we had this past few days. So we're going to go ahead and dim the lights, and we're going to go ahead and play this. Play? Yep.
While Rainy raps.
And there's one more, I think, that's really quick. 3 seconds is not enough.
It's recording, already. You guys are gonna dance, ready? The coconut nut is a giant nut. If you eat too much, you'll get very fat.
All right. Oh.
It's my team, guys.
Is that it? Yeah. All right. All right. So that was a reminder of what happened this past weekend. Now, looking ahead, we do have a couple other conferences that you'll want to know about. Most notably, just in the next, next month, just June 14th, the weekend of June 14th, there's the V3Con. No, it was an accidental naming, actually. We're the N3, and there's a V3Con happening in Los Angeles. And so I want to let you know that if you happen to be in Los Angeles for that weekend, then this is what you can expect.
It fills a void that I think existed until V3 came along. Bloggers and social media. There's a lot of interest from young people, new journalists, kind of new world journalists who are out here who have a good understanding of what blogging is and what social media is, and it allows them to kind of go mainstream with the talents that they're developing.
Everyone is so wonderful and accepting and welcoming, and it's just been amazing to connect with different people from all different walks of media.
I'm just amazed at how much talent there is out there, and also how open people are to coming together and helping and being part of this. People getting inspired by Asian Americans doing great things, and doing it online, and having our voice and being visible.
Okay, so if that isn't enough, if you love what you see here today, you're going to love what you're going to see in New York in a couple of months. So just imagine N3Con times 4. 4 times the people, 4 times the recruitment, 4 times the workshop. Yeah,
Hi
yeah.
there, I'm Mike Bloomberg. Welcome to New York City, AAJA. We're a diverse city of over 8 million people, and we're the cultural and media capital of the world. It's a concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do.
Here's what's happening in the news. The AAJA convention is coming to the Big Apple.
You're damn right.
That's right, AAJA.
It's New York, baby.
The last time the AAJA convention came to New York was in 2000.
That was the year of Y2K, and the Mets and Yankees battled it out in the World Series. So much has happened since then.
From the 9/11 tragedy
And Bernie Madoff.
And good things like Miracle on the Hudson.
And Linsanity. Now, the stories that happen here tend to garner worldwide attention.
But while news stories come and go, one thing has not changed.
We remain the media capital of the world.
Come join us in 2013. You'll get a taste of what journalists live for.
From dining experiences, culture, New York landmarks, to arts, entertainment, and even sports.
The opportunities are endless.
Everything is just a subway ride away. Or a taxi cab ride away. So start spreading the news, AA. These streets will make you
We are pleased to announce that New York City will host the AAJA 23rd convention. So start spreading the news and prepare yourself to have an AAJA state of mind.
Yeah, I'll turn on the lights. Great, thank you. And with, that is August 21st through 24th. So hopefully you guys can make it. You guys are going. Who's going already? Wow, we have a lot. Wow, look at that. And consider going. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh,
If you go, you have to register before June 14th to qualify for the cheaper rate. So it's $300 US, and after June 14th, it's going to jump up. And make your hotel reservation soon.
all right. Thank you all. See you next time.